by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich. Don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good morning. This is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. It's just gone 10 o'clock and there is plenty to discuss this morning, including those protests at migrant hotels over the last 24 hours. 15 arrests were made. Mostly, of course, they were peaceful. They happened at the Thistle Barbican Hotel in central London. Also protests in East London, in Newcastle and Manchester. A couple of counter demonstrations as well in various places, including London. Lots to discuss in terms of how the police are dealing with those. The sentiment behind it as well. Why are people going on those protests? I think we largely know, but tell me whether you've joined them, whether you support them, what you think the police should do about them, whether free speech is under pressure in this country as a result of how the crackdown is there, or perhaps the police are taking the foot off the gas here. Maybe that's one argument as well. Maybe they're dealing with it differently to how the riots were dealt with last summer. We know, of course, from Andy Williams, he caused quite a stir yesterday, saying that there are many far-right thugs, as he essentially put it yesterday. We'll look back at that as well. We'll also speak to Mike Neville, former Scotland Yard detective, and Councillor George Madgwick, who took part in the entirely peaceful protest in Portsmouth when free speech was suppressed, in regard to him simply putting in the public domain, quite logically, quite reasonably, that there was an asylum seeker who had been charged with a sexual offence in that area. We'll talk as well about what the government is doing. Yvette Cooper wants a fast-track scheme to tackle the asylum backlog. Can it work? She also wants to put a 5-year maximum sentence for people advertising small boats on things like TikTok. How on earth is that going to work in practical terms? How are they going to get these people here in the country? They're largely in Germany, Bulgaria, Albania, places like that anyway. How on earth are they going to actually face justice? We'll talk to an immigration lawyer as well. We'll talk to a former chief immigration officer of Border Force. There's loads to discuss. We'll also talk about Brexit. Big survey in the Sunday Times today saying that only 29% of people would vote leave. What do you feel about Brexit? Would you vote leave again? Would you do it again today? It was nearly 9 years ago, believe it or not. Has the Brexit that has started, has existed, that is now there, it's a process, not an event, but we have Brexited. Is that doing the right thing? is our relationship with the EU as it should be? We'll talk all about that as time goes on. We'll also talk about fresh attacks in regard to Bryce Norton. And Hamas refusing to disarm until a Palestinian state is established. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Give me a ring, let me know your thoughts. You know me, I take as many calls as I can. I put as many voice notes on the air as possible. The deal from your angle is that you give me a ring or send me a voice note, and keep those voice notes to less than a minute if you wouldn't mind. 0344 499 1000. That is the number to call this morning to get your voice on the air. 87222 is the text number. Be sure to put the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, as I say, less than a minute, please, to the main number. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss here on Talk between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me. Well, I want to talk now about those protests yesterday. There was a big protest at the Thistle Barbican Hotel in central London. It houses asylum seekers, of course. Protests on the issue in East London as well, in Newcastle, in Manchester. The Manchester protest was organised by Britain First. 15 people were arrested in total right around the country at all those different protests yesterday. That's the current total. There were counter demonstrations held at various places, including in London and Newcastle as well. How are the police dealing with this? Is peaceful protest alive and well in this country? Would you go on those protests? Maybe you've been on one of those protests. Maybe you want to give me a ring and tell me your experience. How was it dealt with? How were you received? Do you feel you've got it out of your system now, or is there more to talk about? Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Barry says, does peaceful protest work? Sharon says, you work hard all your working life in this country and you get nothing, zero. And Brian in Worthing says, morning Peter, if these far left idiot thugs love these illegals so much, they should be rounded up and forced to each take one home with them. Let's see how welcome they are there. These people are rent-a-mob sent in to agitate. So already quite a number of discussion points there. Let me know your thoughts on all of that. As you know, I'll put as many of them on the air as possible. I want to talk to Mike Neville now. Mike is a former Scotland Yard detective. Mike, it's really interesting in terms of how the police seem to be dealing with these protests. Do you think it's substantively different from how the riots were dealt with last summer from the policing perspective? And why do you think that is, if you think that?
I really do think that, Peter, and I think it's a politically motivated issue. I think this has come from the government. If you looked at how the Southport riots were dealt with, Keir Starmer was on there denouncing all the people involved, whether they were peaceful or not, as far-right thugs, and the courts were, the police were rounding people up and people have been put before the courts and jailed. Now we see a different approach, and I think this is due to, it is literally vote losing to carry on like he's going. He's obviously been told by his aides that this is now, this crisis, as it's reached, is now something which will lose in votes, and by denouncing ordinary people, mums and dads, grandparents who are going to these protests, he will lose votes. And so you see different rhetoric. You see the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, saying that, we've got to listen to people. And so I think the police will be dealing with it differently. And you can see in your images that even now that the police are wearing soft hats. They're wearing the normal flat caps. And I think this will, this just shows how the police will be dealing with it. If you looked at last year, they will all be in riots, helmets and the like. Another shocking thing you see about these images is how these alleged anti-racists, they're often masked up. There's very few of the people against the asylum seekers who will be in masks, but the people who come with those socialist worker flags are in masks, and the police could be ruthless with them. They could put an order out. They can do it under legislation to say you've got to take your mask off. But I really do think that the way this policing has been done is a political move.
Just remind us in regard to the masks, because I often get questions about it. You explained this to me really, really well the other day when we chatted, just in regard to masks, because a decision has to be made, doesn't it, by a relatively senior officer, not really senior, but at an inspector level, I think, in regard to whether it's illegal or not to wear masks in that particular area. Is that correct?
So, that's absolutely right. So an inspector, one of the officers with 2 pips, like a lieutenant in the army, can give an order, a written order, that masks cannot be worn for 24 hours in that particular place. And then if you refuse to take off the mask, then it becomes an arrestable offence. So it's quite easy to deal with, really.
Mike, stay where you are a second. I just want to bring in Councillor George Madgwick. He is the group leader of Reform UK and Portsmouth Council. George, you were part of one protest in Waterlooville, completely peaceful protest, which has happened in the last week. And there are, of course, a number of arrests that have happened at other protests, but not the one you were involved with. And I just wonder whether you are encouraged, whether you're dismayed, whether you are worried, how you feel about the fact that this seems to be spreading. These protests seem to be spreading. And of course, whilst yours was completely legal and no one was arrested, there have been some arrests at these other protests.
Thank you for having me on, Peter. As I said the other day when I was on your show, this has now not become an isolated issue. This has become systemic across the whole country. The population are now becoming really tired of this issue, and I decided to speak up and give a voice. Of course, if any crimes or any arrests are made at these protests, it's disappointing because it really fundamentally takes the news story away from what the fundamental cause is and why people are going to them. So I would urge anybody that's listening or watching this show, if you are going to these, just remain peaceful. I know it's difficult sometimes because people are there to agitate you. And I think that's what we've got to note, Peter, is that people are sent in from the left, from Stand Up to Racism, from Antifa, with their masks to agitate people. You know from this morning that migrants have been throwing things out of windows or laughing at people. We had it in Portsmouth just several weeks ago where there was, I think, 3 arrests. It wasn't a protest I was at. However, the migrants were out the window throwing eggs at the protesters, and that's what sparked everything off. So we got to remember that there is agitators out there that will spark these things, but I need people to remember to stay calm at all times because it takes the story away.
And George, in regard to the protests that are happening, as we say, largely peaceful, although there have been a few arrests, 15 arrests, do you see this as something that will grow? And do you have any confidence that the government will actually listen to this? We've heard from Mike Neville that the policing, the form of policing, the style of policing has changed in some way. But in terms of actually getting an answer and getting some movement on this, we're going to talk about some of the government's new policies in a second. But do you think, George, that these will be seen, or will people in the establishment and in the government simply look at those people, roll their eyes and say, oh, well, they're all the far right?
I think that the narrative is changing. As it was said shortly before, you know, this time last year, Keir Starmer was calling anyone that attended a protest extreme far right. That's what he was labelling people as incorrectly. And I know literally elderly, disabled women and veterans that were going to these protests.
There's a lot of families at these protests. You've told us this before.
A lot of families.
A lot of people who are members of no political party, people who are not affiliated with any group or any umbrella organisation even, who are simply coming out, mothers, children, families, to protest this issue because they feel it is so incredibly important for their community.
Correct. And I think Labour are going to have to start to listen. Listen, these MPs, these high-level politicians care about one thing and one thing only, and that is keeping their position in power. And to do so, if they see those polls drop in, if they see those X's coming out of that box on voting days and at by-elections, they're going to have to react. And it's very obvious now that there's a vast majority of the people in this country that feel so aggrieved by the situation that I can't see a way that Labour do not act and remain in power.
George, we'll leave it with you for the meantime, but thank you. That's Councillor George Madgwick, Group Leader of Reform UK in Portsmouth. But Mike Neville, I want to ask you just about a couple of other policies that the government has put forward, whether you think they will work and indeed can work. One in particular in regard to advertising, promotion of small boats on things like TikTok. We know that these gangs put this out on TikTok, especially. They say they advertise a life in Britain and their services, as it were, coming across in those boats and so on. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, wants to have a specific offence now for that. How practical is this policy? How realistic is it to say, right, you're sitting in Bulgaria, you're sitting in Germany, you're putting something on TikTok promoting this, we're going to say we want to arrest you. How many of those people are actually going to be extradited to the UK, tried and sent to prison for 5 years? It just doesn't sound to me like a policy that has many legs. What do you think?
I absolutely agree with you, Peter. It's another piece of hot air, isn't it? The politicians like to create crimes that will say, what it says, the politicians are saying to us, we're doing something about it. And the reality, it'll do nothing. It's hard enough to extradite somebody from another country when they've committed a murder. Never mind the fact that somebody's put a video on TikTok. And we can see, if you just ask, how many people who are driving the boat had the engine, how many of those have been arrested? And they arrive on the shore. So it just shows, it's like all these things. It's like the nonsense, like the recently banned samurai swords and all this sort of stuff. About 10 people might have been killed with a samurai sword. Most people are killed with a kitchen knife. But they bring in a law that says to the public, we're doing something. And in the reality is, they're doing nothing.
Well, the classic as well was the one where they said if there are more than 80 people in a boat, that's illegal. I mean, if you have 79, that's apparently fine, even though the act of bringing the people to the country by itself is illegal. And a lot of the time I've often felt, even when I worked in government for 3.5 years, that there are so many times when different governments of all stripes put things forward and say, we're going to have a law to solve this problem, when actually the way to solve something is to implement the law that is already there. But if you announce something and announce something and announce something, banning samurai swords, how many times have we heard that? I think we've heard that 5 times in the last 2 years, and it still, properly hasn't happened. We keep being told these things are happening, and actually, even when they do, they sometimes even create more problems.
Well, absolutely. If you look at the Martin's Law, the terrorism, now small venues like the Shrewsbury Flower Show has had to close because it cannot manage the implementation of things to prevent terrorism. So
the Shrewsbury Flower Show has had to close.
Has been cancelled. Has been cancelled because of they can't implement the terrorist things. This all came in after.
What's someone going to do? Blow up the begonias? I mean, that is just absolutely outrageous. That you can't have something as straightforwardly British and straightforwardly as a flower show because of the unintended consequences of that legislation.
But so what you have is they brought this in because of the bombing of the Manchester Arena. The way to solve the bombing of Manchester Arena and stop things like that is to deal with jihadists, to deal with Islamist terrorists. But they don't do that. They don't want to do that. What they do is they bring in something else to cover it up with it's like a sticking plaster on everything. All these things, Dangerous Dogs Act, we've had that in the past. All these silly pieces of legislation which achieve nothing but get the politicians in front of us claiming to have done something. What we need, as you've said, is laws enforced. We need stop and search done. That's what stops knives, not silly laws about a particular type of knife. What we need done about terrorism is not stopping the Shrewsbury Flower Show. We need to have proper targeting of those who are a threat to us. But this is how the country's run at the moment, Peter, and it's really bad for everybody.
Mike, thanks for your contribution this morning. Mike Neville there, former Scotland Yard detective. Let's speak to George in Northampton. First caller of the day in my show. 03444 499 1000 is the number George has called. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, morning, Peter.
Morning.
This law that they're going to bring in about banning adverts for crossing the channel. So you've got a guy on a boat filming in France who's uploading it to a server that's in Holland for a Chinese company. I can really see the British government being able to decide that they've got jurisdiction over any of that.
Also, well, first of all, that is absolutely correct, George, and I agree with every single word you've said in that example. Illustrates the point beautifully. The point is as well that if you're going to extradite someone, if you're going to go to all the legal hoops to jump through, get an arrest warrant, deal with Interpol, do all that kind of stuff, and we did talk a little bit about that with Mike Neville. I mean, that is a big thing that takes a lot of time, effort and money. I don't want there to be any ads on TikTok, but is putting an ad on TikTok something that we want these, is that going to smash the gangs if we say to someone, right, you put an ad on TikTok, we're now going to send you to prison for 5 years? I'd just be really interested, George, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this. I'd be really interested if in 10 years' time we have a conversation and say, how many people who put ads on TikTok are actually going to be in prison as a result of that?
Well, I think we're going to get the same as the number of gangs smashed. It's going to be a grand total of 0. And if they're not allowed to use TikTok, they'll use WhatsApp, they'll use Snapchat, they'll use Facebook. Now, we know that in the past, getting anybody extradited from the States to the UK, if it's gone on the Facebook server, it's based in the US.
Yeah.
So you know, there was that lady who killed the motorcyclist in Northampton, who was then run off and claimed diplomatic immunity.
That's right.
You know, we couldn't get her back.
And also, we can't deal with the criminals that are in this country at the moment. But
anyway,
Yvette Cooper's plan with this, and just to be fair to Yvette Cooper, it's not just TikTok, it's all forms of social media, it's putting ads out there. But nonetheless, she's essentially saying this law is going to smash the gangs, it's going to get those gang masters from wherever, and we're going to get them on this. And the point is that we're not dealing with the problem in this country, we're not dealing with the problem in terms of people coming across from France. And also, it's a kind of patchwork policy. There are little bits coming out here and there. She's saying she wants to sort processing as well. I'd love her to sort processing. I'd love her to sort all of this. And the fact that those people are in those hotels is all about processing, George. But this patchwork of policies, to me, doesn't seem to be working.
No, well, the thing is, I think, and, you know, I may be wrong, but I think they're just announcing this as a smokescreen for them not to actually have to do anything, because they want the migrants to come in. Because, you know, if you didn't want the migrants to come in, the obvious one is put them in tents in an old prison or army base, make it so unattractive that they don't want to come here.
Well, George, it all comes down to political will, doesn't it? If you really, if Labour or any government, I'm not just having a go at Labour here, the Tories failed massively on this as well, but if you really want to sort something, we saw with the blast furnace in Scunthorpe, right? That was a huge problem. It was imminent. It was like, right, we need to keep that blast furnace going, otherwise British steel is going to collapse. They recalled Parliament on a Saturday, first time that had happened in many years, and said, we're going to implement this legislation, we're going to save British steel. If they want to do it with their huge majority, 411 MPs out of 650 were elected for Labour on the 4th of July last year. If they want to do it, if they want to solve this problem, they can do it, George.
Oh, yeah. We'll go back to the Australians. Look what they did for their immigration problem. If they have the political will, they could do it. The unfortunate thing is, I don't think they have the political will. It's all try and pacify the population who are standing up, going to protests and complaining about these people. You know, yes, if migrants come here, they come here. But we shouldn't give them, you know, the world and his dog. Basically, we shouldn't be filling our country with people that we don't know who they are, we don't know where they've come from, we don't know their past records. And that's the normal thing that everybody says. We don't know who they are.
Okay.
But also, when they get here, we shouldn't give them everything on top.
Well, exactly. And I mean, I just think everything you've said during your call today, George, has made perfect sense. Thank you for it. That's George in Northampton. Loads of messages coming in, including Dan from Kent. He says, these protests are not political. I think only half the electorate voted last election. This is beyond politics. This is simply people who are concerned about the safety of their families and communities, and if Parliament feels, they will rise up. The majority, Ernie says, the calling of the majority of peace-loving people in this country far right, and the giving away of the Chagos Islands and the moving away from America, and Miliband sitting at the top table of the Chinese Communist Party sent shivers down my spine. I don't think Ed Miliband's a communist. I don't think he's in the Chinese Communist Party. I think that's just factually wrong, I'm afraid. Another George says, if George Matchwich states the migrants are throwing stuff at the protesters, then they should be arrested. I don't think you can legally lob stuff into a crowd, can you? Once again, two-tier policing, says George. Well, we don't know if any of those 15 arrests were of migrants, but I think we can probably guess. Lots to discuss. We've got our debate desk coming up in just a second. Simeon Lee is with us, as is James Bealby. Commentators both will get their views and things, and yours too. You want to get your call in? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
have knives.
These fighting age males and sexually active males, might I add, are coming over to our country having no idea of either our laws or our culture.
And it must be, like, bizarre for them, because I get it, because they must see the way that we dress and the way that we women have a voice, and it must be bizarre for them. But the point is that enough is enough now.
Darling, I am making no excuses for these people. No.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Brad in Cambridge, who says, in the eyes of those on the left of politics, there is no right. Anything to the right of their own beliefs is now automatically far left. The term is now meaningless, says Brad in Cambridge. Thank you to Nigel from Berkshire. He says, great show, Peter. One simple thing the government could do is make any illegal immigrant ineligible for asylum. Trying to police social media is a fool's errand. I want to talk a little bit, definitely more about migration with our debate desk panellist, Simeon Lee, who's a policy analyst from the Taxpayers Alliance. Hi, Simeon.
Pleasure to be here.
And James Bealby, political commentator. Lovely to see you.
Good morning, Peter.
We'll talk more about immigration, I promise, and do send your thoughts in. But I just want to talk at this exact moment about the fact that the Sunday Times has done a poll, 2,113 adults in Great Britain, questioned by the polling company More in Common, and something like, yes, here we go, 29% of people would vote to leave the EU. Very different, of course, to the 52% of whom did in June 2016. Kelvin's been in touch with a voice note on this. This is what Kelvin has to say.
Good morning, Peter. On Brexit, would we vote against a leave? Well, I would, because the problems in the country isn't because of Brexit itself, it's the unwillingness of the governments that we had in. None of them really wanted to leave, so that's why it's in a mess. The unwillingness of them, nothing to do with Brexit. If they'd have done the jobs right in the first place, we wouldn't have this mess that we've got now. And to keep blaming migrants, well, you're getting migrants because of Brexit, a load of crap. They come in because they want all the freebies, and the people that can't see that are all the lefties. They need to wake up. Keep giving them money. It's like having a stray dog. If you keep giving it food, it's going to keep coming back to you for more. So that's what's wrong with the country. Bye.
Kelvin, thanks for your thoughts on that, talking about how Kelvin believes he would still vote for Brexit as something that he still feels very, very strongly about. He's clearly part of the 29%. Simeon, were you old enough to vote in the Brexit referendum in 2016? It was 9 years ago.
Yeah, well, unfortunately not, but I think with the new government's decision to lower the voting age, I probably would be.
You would have been old enough. How would you have voted in the Brexit referendum if you had had a chance then?
Well, I think it's clear that Brexit has had some benefits. If you look at the Trump trade tariffs, the UK has a lower rate of tariffs compared to the European Union. So I think even the Labour government admits that there are now benefits to the Brexit debate. But I think this poll is really just a snapshot in time. And what really matters is how people voted at the referendum, at the elections,
of course,
prior to that. And I think the British people have repeatedly endorsed either Brexit itself during the referendum or parties that have campaigned on getting Brexit done. So I think this poll is really just a snapshot in time. It doesn't.
Well,
really
they didn't, of course, with Labour. Labour did not want to get Brexit done, voted against everything Theresa May and indeed Boris Johnson wanted to do at the last election. But is it a dead issue? Is it something that we should continue to talk about? Do you care that this sort of essentially in this poll anyway, this collapse, 52% of people saying they'd vote Remain, 29% of people saying they'd vote Leave, 8% don't know and 11% would not vote. James, you were a Remainer.
Well, I voted for Remain. I wouldn't describe myself as a Remainer, but 68...
What's the difference?
Well, I don't think I had particularly strong views. I thought the status quo was probably better than leaping into the unknown, which is pretty much what we did, let's face it. But what I was really struck by on this poll is that 68% of Reform voters say they would vote to leave. And one thing you don't hear Nigel Farage talking about...
What about the other 32%? There are 32% of Reform voters who either wouldn't vote Leave or don't know,
yeah.
or wouldn't vote. That's quite strange.
But you don't hear Nigel Farage talking about Brexit anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously, he founded his career on Brexit when he was an MEP and with UKIP and then all the other parties that he's been part of over the years. He doesn't talk about Brexit anymore, and that it indicates that either Brexit has been done and it's forgotten, or he thinks perhaps this isn't a vote winner, and that poll would back that up.
His view, of course, would, I suppose, well, it has been, and he said this publicly. He said that Brexit wasn't done properly. He would do it differently if he becomes Prime Minister. He's going to implement policies that would do Brexit in a different way. Simeon, I wonder, as someone who perhaps would have voted Leave had you had the opportunity and you weren't, too young, which is a lovely problem to have, Simeon, really. I just wonder what you think our relationship with the EU is now. Clearly, Keir Starmer has moved closer to the EU. Some people say that's a betrayal of Brexit and that actually this is still a live issue. What's your view?
Well, I think there has been a failure to deliver on what was promised with Brexit. I mean, it's not just been a failure to deliver, it's a failure to sort of capitalise on the increased powers that we had after the referendum, after leaving the European Union. We see this with the ECHR, for example. So there's a lot of talk now about leaving the ECHR, but leaving the ECHR alone doesn't actually solve the underlying problems of migration, because we still need to actually implement a system that would actually fix that. So there's a lot of talk about leaving things, but I think what's more important at the end of the day is being able to follow through on that, to actually use the powers that we have in order to fix some of these problems.
In terms of the division in politics, and I don't think any of us would disagree, there's a huge amount of division at the moment, more so certainly than there was before the Brexit referendum. To me, I just wonder, maybe this is unfair, James, but I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Is the division because of Brexit, or is the division because of the fallout from Brexit and the fact that there was so much dither and delay for those few years, to the extent that we had an election on 2019, the thought on everyone's lips, even whether people loved Brexit, hated Brexit, voted Leave, voted Remain, was just get Brexit done?
Yeah, I think it has created a lot of division in society, because it's a binary thing, isn't it? You're either for or against. In my opinion, you classify as me a Remainer, probably slightly more nuanced, can see benefits on both sides. But I think it was very much polarised. You're either for or against.
Yeah.
And the 50...
Well, you had to, and that's the thing with the referendum. I was in a reasonably similar position. I was about a 6 out of 10 kind of person who voted Remain. I probably should have voted Leave, but I just wasn't quite convinced, and I was a bit nervous about the whole thing. Do you know what? The main thing, two main reasons I voted Remain were, one was nobody, and I mean nobody, was talking about Northern Ireland and the border in Northern Ireland, which, surprise, surprise, was a huge issue.
Still is.
And still is. And secondly, that, George Osborne with his Project Fear, we're all going to die, there'll be no money, we're not going to have any jobs, none of which came true. All absolute nonsense, and goes back to my sort of guiding principles in regard to see how I see politics in this country, which is really the vast majority of problems in this country you can trace back to George Osborne or Tony Blair.
That's a very interesting position. They're probably true, and you can even go back further, maybe to Margaret Thatcher and then the 1970s. What's the last stable government that we had, where everyone says they're doing a good job, everything's okay, there's no division in society. We've had that since probably the end of the consensus in the 1950s and 60s.
Yeah, fair point.
So I think division isn't anything new, but I think it's perhaps
the level of division.
It's exacerbated now by social media, and people can find their tribes online, and if they're in some sort of echo chamber, either on the right or the left or Remain or Brexit, then they're only hearing people like them. They think that's what everyone thinks. But as we know, life is nuanced and there's lots of grey areas.
I absolutely horrified a Sinn Féin MP at one point in around about 2018, when I told her that I was so annoyed that there was all the talk about the second referendum. And I remember saying to her that if there is a second referendum, I believe in democracy so much that I'll actually campaign for Leave, even though I wasn't going to vote Leave. I would campaign for Leave because I believed in democracy so much. And I think that second referendum stuff really, really harmed a lot of it. It's like, oh, well, you're not intelligent enough to get it wrong. Oh, it's only 52%. Oh, that's sort of a majority, but not really. It's an absolute majority. That's what a referendum does.
And there won't be another referendum on this issue or anything else ever again. Governments have really learnt their lesson that they don't work well having a binary choice of one thing or the other.
Do you think you'll ever get to vote in a referendum, Simeon?
Well, I think referendums in general are a good idea, to get people, to actually have people on the record, what do they believe, as opposed to leaving it up to politicians, as we've seen time and time again.
But we vote for them in the elections. You vote for them to be your representative in Parliament.
Well, I think both of the things can exist at the same time. We can have a referendum and as well as...
What would you want a referendum on? If you could have a referendum on any issue, what would be the number one issue?
I think the biggest issue today is whether or not the UK should stay in the ECHR. I think that would be an important issue to be decided by referendum, because I think politicians themselves don't have any idea what they're doing on that particular issue. I think they need
to
very clear direction.
So why would the general public have any better information than politicians on that particular issue?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's the general public that are supposed to be in charge in a democracy, and in a democracy, it's the general public that should decide whether or not this country remains in the ECHR or not.
And you can also learn about the issues. All of us learned more about the EU, and all of us would certainly learn more about the ECHR. I've certainly learned a heck of a lot more about the ECHR in the 5 years of doing these programmes, for example.
Sure.
We'll come back to all those issues, including migration as well, which is the big one people want to talk about this morning. Margaret in Birmingham says Starmer has enjoyed every minute of taking a wrecking ball to this country since he was elected, treating the British public with contempt. Yvette Cooper should get her act together. Migrants are laughing at us. Stop rolling out the red carpet. Detain and deport. Just do it. Pete in Lincolnshire says we as a country should take the assumption that any illegal migrant crossing the channel without papers who should be staying in France are French and take them straight back to the day French might stop taking the migrants, moving them across Europe, says Pete. It's a big domestic problem in France as well. I don't really care, to be honest. It's up to Macron. He can deal with it. But he's not dealing with it. He's sending them our way, and they are taking the foot off the gas. They're not doing nearly enough of what they want to, what they should be doing, and what we're paying them £500 million a year to do. One thing I've noticed about the debate desk today is that it hasn't quite been as divisive as yesterday. A number of people still responding on my social media, and indeed this morning, in regard to what Andy Williams said. We're going to remind ourselves what Andy said and get the reaction of Simeon and indeed James to that. It's all tied up with migration. We'll talk about that big issue. More protests in the last 24 hours. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Sue in Lytham St Anne's. It is a great part of the country. In fact, it is where my nephew lives. Sue says these people should go from a tent in France to a tent in the UK. No phones, no money. I love my Sunday mornings with you, says Sue. Well, thank you very much indeed. I'm glad it's sunny in Lytham. That is great. It is a great part of the world. I've been to Lytham. I went to Booths in Lytham and they said 10 items or fewer. And I just thought, I found my home here. Amanda has been in touch as well and says Starmer's government have their own agenda. In every department, they have no care for the views and concerns of the public. This is now clear to all except for the usual suspects. Jeremy Walsh says, just one point, why have asylum seekers have top iPhones when most of the nation of British people can't afford one? They've also paid thousands of pounds to come across in boats as well. So where did that money come from? Although some of them, of course, paid off and some of them are brought into modern slavery and all sorts of things. Jane says, morning, Peter, I'm appalled by the way migrants are laughing at the protesters. They do not care. If I knew I'm not wanted somewhere, I wouldn't stay. We will talk more about migration in a second, but I actually want to talk about the story now about Rachel Reeves saying that that Badenoch, Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, has said that Rachel Reeves is making bigger mistakes than Liz Truss. Russell won't agree with this. Many of our viewers and listeners won't agree with this. But Liz Truss crashed the economy. Kwasi Kwarteng is the worst Chancellor we've ever had. Those are my opinions. They are not going to change. Shimian, what do you make of these comments?
Look, what we need to fix the public finances are spending cuts, and what we need to fix the economy are tax cuts. Now, with Liz Truss, you had no spending cuts and you had tax cuts. But with Rachel Reeves, you have no spending cuts again, but what you have instead are tax rises. So is one marginally worse than the other? Perhaps. But at the end of the day, if we don't get spending under control, we can't fix anything. And Rachel Reeves clearly is unable to get spending under control. You've seen that with the U-turn on the winter fuel payment. You see that on the total failure of this government to pass the welfare reform bill. And it looks like she's going to be coming back for more in her upcoming budget. You know, at the end of the day, if we don't get spending under control, none of this really matters. And to this point about Kemi Badenoch specifically, does she understand the sort of problems that came with the Liz Truss budget? What specific areas does she intend to cut in the government budget? It's quite easy to sort of lambast Labour for spending, but what does Kemi Badenoch herself think should be cut? I think that's an important question that she has to answer.
Well, that is a very good point as well, and I think a lot of us are asking, right, Conservatives, if you want to be relevant again, if you want to get up from 15, 16% in the polls, what are you going to do? And I keep asking Conservatives about this, and they're saying, well, we're thinking about this, we're having a policy review, we don't want to have a knee-jerk reaction, we don't want to do this, that and the other. But if, you know, Reform UK aren't in that position. They say, we'll do this. They're coming out with policies all the time. They're talking about new things. They're not just, as you correctly said, James, talking about Brexit or even migration. They're talking about loads of different things. And the Conservatives are just not doing that. And I just wonder if Kemi Badenoch's criticism of Rachel Reeves, first of all, if you agree with it, James, and secondly, whether you think she's in any position to actually criticise.
I think it's a dangerous game to be reminding people of the Liz Truss budget. You know, many people, listeners and people around the country had their mortgages go up as a result of what you said was a disastrous mini-budget. So to be sort of referencing that and signposting that, I think the more sensible approach that Mel Stride took some weeks ago was to apologise and say it was a mistake, we're moving on, we're coming up with some new policies. But in terms of reform, they are coming up with a huge amount of uncosted spending pledges. And then Kemi Badenoch, when it comes to the winter fuel allowance, for example, one of the few things Labour did try and cut, she didn't support that. So she's on the one hand saying, Rachel Reeves is wrecking the economy because we need spending cuts, etc. She's not supporting those spending cuts.
In fairness to Reform UK, they have outlined, you can say they're unfunded, and many people have said that.
They're spending the money multiple times.
Well, they've indicated at least where it would come from, and, you know, we were told in the Labour manifesto, not that you're responsible for that, James, but we were told, you know, everything's costed, it's all going to be fine. Oh, look, there's a £22 billion black hole. So, Shimian, I just wonder in all of this, in regard to the economy, I mean, Rachel Reeves faces some very, very tough choices here. Do you think, I know you don't want it to happen, but do you think it's inevitable that she will raise taxes in the budget?
Well, I think the reason she faces these tough choices is because she's failed to deliver on the government's own agenda. So if you look at the welfare reform bill, that was promised by the Labour government. They have a massive majority and they failed to deliver it. And that's the reason why we're going to see the prospect of tax rises in this upcoming budget. So it's not at all the case that she was somehow forced to make these tax rises. It's because she failed to deliver in the sort of reforms that Labour promised. So I don't see how we can say that she's somehow being forced to do it when there was a plan and she failed to deliver on that plan.
We'll talk more about that. We'll talk more about migration. We'll talk about what you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get your call or your voice note in. Thanks to Tommy, who has been in touch, says, I'm confused as to what the rival protests are about. The protests aren't about race, and surely every British citizen, no matter what colour they are, religion they follow, should want to stop all these criminals coming in, causing harm to our people, not to mention the strain on all our services and the economy they cause. Well, Tommy, an awful lot of people will completely agree with that. Antifa, Stand Up to Hate, these kind of anti-racist organisations, as they would call themselves, believe essentially that these protests are racist. We will, of course, talk to them as the programmes go on. I'm on Drive all week, and no doubt this debate will continue. But the fact is that there are so many people who are just discounting people who I think have reasonable concerns as far right, as racist, gammon, you know, whatever words you want to use. And I think, for example, gammon, I think that is a racist term. I think that is actually a racist term. Many people will disagree with me, and that's fine. But actually, we're in a position where the government needs to start listening. Is it going to? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. We'll be back with Shimian and James in just a second, and give ourselves a reminder of what happened yesterday on the debate desk. It was spicy. Stay with us.
noblemen there.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we're on the debate desk with Simeon Lee and James Beelby. It's great to have you in the studio today. If you were watching yesterday or listening yesterday, you will have heard Andy Williams. We're going to take a little look back on that because the comments are still coming in on what Andy said about the migration protest. We'll look at that clip in just a few minutes' time. But Kate from Leeds has been in touch on yesterday's debate desk versus today's. This is what Kate has to say.
Morning, Peter. It's Kate from Leeds. Yeah, I went off on one yesterday, but you two people this morning on this debate are decent people. I can see that. They're talking and they're getting the points of view across. I think yesterday, Andy, he said some not very nice things, and that's why he got people's backs up. So, you know, what can you do? I mean, the two guys this morning, I can see they're both decent guys. But Andy, no, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry, but he got a lot of people's backs up, and my hair was stood on end yesterday, I'll just let you know. Anyway, good show as usual, Peter. You know, thanks, bye.
Thanks, Kate. We'll look back on what Andy said in a minute or two, but actually the issue that he was talking about was migration, and that is something that is, to me, I think, the number one issue of people who contact and view and listen to this station. We've talked about what the government wants to do. We've seen a huge number, well, not a huge number, but a small number of protests. We've seen a small number of arrests as well, 15. There have been many protests that have been totally peaceful. I just wonder, when you see those happening, this is clearly growing, James, what your view is?
When I see people protesting about outside migrant hotels, what are they? I understand the concerns clearly, but what do they actually want to happen as a result? Those
well,
people
they want them to close.
To be displaced to another area, which will
well, they
then
don't want
have
them to be here in the
protest.
first place.
So the government is pledging to close migrant hotels by the end of this
But
Parliament.
they're going to move them to social housing, and that's going to put even more pressure on social housing.
But if those migrant hotels were closed that day because of the protest, which is clearly what some of the protesters want, where would those people be displaced to? Obviously, a lot of the protesters would say we'd like them to be returned to their country of origin. That's not going to happen overnight. So I totally understand why there will be some concerns and legitimate protests. Obviously, I fully support that. Obviously, never violent protest under any circumstances. But I think, where do they want those people to go? What do they want to happen? It's a form of NIMBYism, I think.
It might be a form of NIMBYism, but also not in my backyard. It's not about a house being built. It's about people in your area who are not being processed, who are hoovering up resources. You know, these are legitimate reasons that people are protesting. I'm not like you. I'm not condoning any form of violence whatsoever. I'm not condemning hate. I'm not condemning racism, or I'm not condoning racism. I'm not condoning hate, obviously. But there's so many people on these protests that have legitimate concerns. This is growing. Do you think the government will listen, Simeon?
Well, I think what these protests do is put enormous pressure on the government to actually fix the system. And in order to fix the system, we need to fix the incentives of the system. So what Labour said, smashing the gangs, smashing the gangs, smashing the gangs, that simply does not work. What we need to do is fix the incentives of the system. So I think the sort of Conservative government had an idea, I think a good idea in principle, the Rwanda plan, in order to remove the incentive for people coming here. We have things in Australia, for example, where they do offshore processing. That's another way to reduce the incentive. At the end of the day, the sort of migrant hotels issue is a symptom. of the problem. It's a symptom of the wider system that is broken. It just simply doesn't work. And we've had like a 300% increase in the number of asylum seekers since 2014. And that's unsustainable, and we have to fix the system. And I think this migrant hotel issue is a symptom rather than the sort of cause of the entire issue.
I think that's what Vet Cooper herself is saying, isn't it? In the papers this morning, she's saying the best way to restore law and order is to get through the backlog and make the system work. That's the best way to stop these protests.
And that's another thing that's not going to happen overnight either.
No, of course not. Exactly. So these protests are going to continue, but then the backlog won't be cleared overnight. We're going to have a fast-track scheme to try and do that as quickly as possible, overhaul the appeals process so people can be moved on more quickly. But again, all of that takes time. And I think whilst the protesters have legitimate concerns, what are they actually wanting, and do they really understand the fact that it can't just happen overnight? There is no silver bullet.
Let's talk, let's re-watch and re-listen to what Andy Williams said almost at exactly this time, actually, yesterday. He was on the debate desk yesterday with Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, and this clip and what he said has really quite annoyed quite a number of people. I just got a reaction from Shimian and James to it, and yours as well. If you still want to talk about it, that's absolutely fine. This is my show, but it's your show too. Andy Williams, who will be invited back on this programme, said this yesterday.
Many of these people, you can call them patriots, mothers, fathers, whatever, concerned citizens, many of them are members of the far right. We've seen it. The protest today is being organised partly by a group called Patriots of Britain. It is run by an ex-member of the BNP. You don't get much more far right than that. It is absolutely crystal clear that many of the people involved in these protests are far right thugs. And we saw it in Southport last year. Not everybody involved in those protests were far right thugs, but many of them were. I keep hearing that Lucy Connolly is a martyr who is in prison to somehow represent all of these people. She's got 20 months left in prison. I hope she serves every single one of them. She's exactly where she deserves to be. She's the standard bearer for the far right, and I think
Andy, that's outrageous. That is an outrageous suggestion.
I'm sorry. We have to call this out.
All right,
you've been
talking for a few minutes now. I just want to ask you, how can you call someone a thug when not a single arrest has been made at Epping, at Waterlooville?
I think the behaviour has been extremely intimidating. I think it has been unpleasant for some of the communities who are there. I would say, by the way, I don't think that groups like Stand Up to Racism help by organising counter-protests. I think that just antagonises the situation and raises the temperature.
Does you calling these people far-right help?
Well, I don't think it helps when there are people who are denying what is plain to see in front of them, which is that many, but as I said, not all, of these people are. I'm calling a spade a spade. These people, many of them, are of the far right.
What do you make of that, Shimian?
Well, I think there's absolutely nothing far right about saying that taxpayers should not be footing the bill for hotel stays for migrants. I mean, these aren't even people who have been granted asylum. These are people who are just seeking asylum. Their claim has yet to be processed. So we don't even know whether they're legitimate asylum seekers or not. And they're being provided with hotels and catering for practically months on end, while people in this country are struggling to make ends meet. I mean, hotels for migrants, just hotels for asylum seekers, cost £2 billion a year. That's £6 million every single day. And add to that the cost on all the other sort of public services. For example, in the NHS, asylum seekers get access to things that people normally wouldn't get. So they get prescriptions for free, they get dental care for free. People usually don't get that. Add to that the cost to local authorities, the sort of many perks that they get. For example, they get discounted swimming pools, access to swimming pools, discounted football matches, yoga classes. At the same time, bins aren't being collected. So I think working people here are being taken for a ride. The very few working people that are left in this country are rightly upset about this.
Your reaction to what Andy said there, James?
I think there will be some people who are protesting who are members of far-right groups. That doesn't mean that it's a far-right group protest, but some of the people there will be opportunistic, the likes of Tommy Robinson, for example. However...
Well, factually, in Manchester, one of the protests yesterday was organised by Britain First, which is designated as a far-right group. So you're factually correct.
So I think that is true. That is a fact, but doesn't mean that everyone who then goes to that is far-right.
Absolutely.
But Stand Up to Racism, the counter-protest, they have historic links to the Socialist Workers' Party, extreme left. Trotskyites. So Waylon Bennett, the organiser of that, is formerly a prominent member of the SWP. I remember him back in the old days, in the 90s. So there are extremists on both sides, and a lot of people who are there both legitimately saying we welcome migrants and those who legitimately say we don't want them here.
Do you think what Yvette Cooper has announced today will make any difference?
Well, I sincerely hope it does. I'm not going to say, no, it won't make any difference, because that doesn't help anyone. Let's hope it does, and let's try and get behind that plan.
What do you think, Shimian, of what the government is proposing, talking about these issues in regard to advertising, TikTok and so on, saying they're going to try to put these gang masters and people who advertise these things in prison for 5 years? Is that going to happen?
I think it's going to be about as useful as the slogan that they're going to smash the gangs. At the end of the day, it's the incentives that are the problem, not the idea that, you know, just if we arrest a couple more people, that's going to make the problem go away. I think there's a real risk that this provides sort of a false narrative that we think that we can solve this through just smashing the gangs.
What should they do instead?
They should fix the incentive system. I think the previous Conservative government...
overnight, does it?
Well, just because it doesn't happen overnight doesn't mean that pressure should not be applied to government to fix these problems.
But that's the pressure that is being applied, and this is the solution they've come up with. Well, they would say they are fixing the incentives.
Well, I contend that it's not a very effective solution, because it doesn't fix the incentives. Just because you make... Well, first of all, I don't think it's going to be very effective. You're not going to be able to arrest people thousands of miles away. But second of all, even if you do arrest these people, more people are just going to come and take their place. So I think until you resolve the fundamental problem, which is the incentives, that problem isn't going to go away, because people will still find ways to come here, buy small boats or somewhere else.
Thank you both very much indeed for your participation on the debate desk today. That's Shimian Lee, policy analyst at the Taxpayers Alliance, and James Bealby, the political commentator. Really appreciate that. Mark says, fix the incentives. It's more than that. It's the driving lessons, trips to football matches, pro iPhones, the list goes on. It's more than incentives. They're clearly being lured over here, in Mark's opinion. This country managed to construct the Nightingale hospitals in a week. They need camps constructed and not let into society. The government has failed to keep the British population safe. Another person says, surely this can all be stopped by stopping all benefits. That is clearly the major pull. William in North Yorkshire says migrants need to be displaced from local hotels back to France or to their own country. And Rob says, I was very angry about your awful insulting guest Andy Williams yesterday. His words were outrageous. Please, please don't have him on again, says Rob. The beauty of free speech and the beauty of being the home of free speech is that you do have the right to offend. You all have the right to say things that other people will disagree with. On my show, we usually disagree without being disagreeable. I think Shimian and James have been a very good two-people example of that today. Andy Williams perhaps less so yesterday, but he's entitled to his view, as are you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text, and keep those voice notes coming in as well. Less than a minute please, otherwise Tech Up Dave does get a little bit grumpy. You can send those on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about on immigration in just a second as well. We'll talk to the former Chief Immigration Officer of the UK Border Force. So stay with us here on Talk. Plenty to discuss.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its two front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, Christ, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive-bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
More migrant protests at those hotels over the past 24 hours, largely peaceful, but 15 arrests. What do you think of them? Maybe you were on one of them. Let me know your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Kevin Saunders in a second. He's a former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. Are Yvette Cooper's policies, the Home Secretary's ideas to smash the gangs? We've got 2 more of them today. One is to arrest people who put advertisements on things like TikTok for small boats. The other one is to sort out processing, which I'd love her to do. I'd love her to get to the root of all the different problems. Let's see what Kevin thinks about that in just a second. Also, Brexit. Would you vote for it? Again, now half of British people want a new Brexit vote, and less than a third of them would be leavers. There's no suggestion there'll be another referendum, but really interestingly, very interesting poll here. Survey for the Sunday Times finding only 29% of people would now vote to leave. Would you still vote to leave or still vote to remain, or maybe you've changed your mind in the last 9 years? What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about the security threat from Palestine Action as well. There have been, we don't know if it's them, but at Bryce Norton there have been further attacks on RAF planes. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We'll make sure we get all your thoughts on the air as well. This is my show, but it's your show too, and I want to make sure I take as many calls, texts, tweets, voice notes. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter, please. You can also send me a voice note. Oh, I've got to say it again. Less than a minute, please. We've received one of 2 minutes, 20 seconds. We're not going to play it because guess what? It's not less than a minute. Please do less than a minute so we get as many people on air as possible. We can also be contacted on WhatsApp text message on the main number. You can also give me a ring. Please do that. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Christina's been in touch and says, "Hi Peter, when I saw all those British flags in these marches, in particular that fantastic lady standing up to those masked protesters, yes, I would vote leave every time," says Christina. Michael says the far-right accusation is nothing more than an insulting deflection the left and the government use to excuse their actions. Joanna in Salisbury says, "Hi Cardi P." Hi Joanna. I would vote to leave again. Most certainly yes, for more reasons than I had before. I'd also like Nigel Farage to properly negotiate the deal too. One other person says, "I was a Brexiteer but would gladly be closer to my European neighbours than have these illegal immigrants. It has only proved one point. Multiculturalism most definitely does not work. It is destroying our country." One more from Sharon who says, "Good to see you. I support the asylum seeker protesters 1000%. This Labour government is not listening to what the British people want. We do not want these people in our country staying in our hotels for free. It needs to stop the taxpayers. It needs to stop. Taxpayers are paying for all of this," says Sharon. Well, 2 new policies from Labour today. Will this be the end? Will this be some form of policy that can actually work? One is that Yvette Cooper wants to sort out processing. She wants to speed that up so it's weeks rather than months, or in some cases years. These people come to this country, they're put in the hotels, it takes ages to process them. It's something that Conservatives would say anyway. They tried to tackle, they increased the number of people, but actually you're working out, are these people asylum seekers or not? Are they legitimately here? Are they fleeing persecution? Some of our viewers and listeners would say, well, they're not at all because they've come from France, which is a safe country. I would say that as well. but there's at least a quarter of them that are bogus asylum seekers. 76% of them get asylum in this country. Let's talk to Kevin Saunders about what he thinks of that policy and the idea about TikTok and other social media. If these gangmasters put these things online, well, they could be arrested and sent to prison for 5 years. Kevin Saunders is a former Chief Immigration Officer of the UK Border Force. Thanks for joining me, Kevin. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Peter. I'm very well, thank you.
Are Yvette Cooper's policies going to solve the problem even a little bit?
No.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Great to talk to you. We'll move on now. No, Kevin. Right.
Sure.
Well, let's take them in order. Let's talk about the processing. We can all agree, if there's processing to be done, it needs to speed up. It's sclerotic.
It does indeed. But the trouble is, you can speed the processing up. You could speed the processing up by giving everybody an amnesty. But it wouldn't solve the problem, because as soon as these people have some sort of status in the UK, they are then the responsibility of the local authority. So all you're doing is transferring the costs from central government to local authorities, and local authorities haven't got two halfpennies to rub together. So they are not going to be happy about having to find housing or accommodation for loads of asylum seekers.
The one aspect of it, I suppose, and I'm trying to be charitable towards the government here, is that if 76% of these people are granted asylum, well, 24% of them aren't. The idea is to get rid of those. Yeah.
Let me stop you. 76% aren't granted asylum. 76% are granted asylum or humanitarian protection.
Okay, what's the difference?
The difference is that humanitarian protection means you haven't got asylum, but we can't remove you. We can't remove you because we can't send you back to your home country.
Okay.
Because it's South Sudan or somewhere like that.
It's not largely... Sorry, tell me the difference. I don't really understand the difference between those two things.
Well, asylum, it was called political asylum, wasn't it, originally?
Yeah.
You came because you didn't like the political situation. Now these people are coming for any number of reasons. The majority of them is they want to find work in the UK.
Yeah, they're economic, yeah.
They're economic. So they're not getting asylum. They're being told, no, you are not entitled to asylum. Also, they're not providing names, addresses, dates of birth that the Home Office can check up on or anything like that. But because they say they've come from countries where there's a civil war, we cannot remove them to these countries.
Okay, because their lives would be at risk. They're essentially saying it's not because I disagree with the regime per se, it's not that I'm a political protester or I'm someone who needs political asylum here because I'll be persecuted previously. They're simply saying, if I go back, there's a war on in South Sudan, it's really dangerous, I might get killed. Okay.
That's right. That's it exactly. So they get what is called humanitarian protection.
Now I understand. Thank you for illuminating that point for me. I didn't know that. Thanks, Kevin.
Now, the thing is, if we take this a stage further and we go to offshore processing, we're going to allow people in who have a genuine political reason for coming to the United Kingdom. So you would see that the number of refusals would go sky high. So why can't we go to offshore processing?
Well, there was an attempt with Rwanda. I mean, isn't that if that is something that should happen, and I think that is a very reasonable thing, hasn't some version of that happened with Albania?
Yeah, well, and look at Albania. My goodness, we got rid of 99% of the people back to Albania, but we did a special deal with them.
Yes.
So. But even so, if you offshored it, if you said, look, we're going to assess the asylum claims, and we're going to assess them in, I don't know, somewhere overseas.
Yeah.
And we're only going to accept people with genuine claims for asylum in the UK. You'll probably end up with 8%.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And you could essentially say to those people on the humanitarian protection side, well, you're in France or you're in Germany or whatever, wherever the overseas processing is. whether it's Rwanda, whether it's Albania, wherever it is, you're in a safe country, you don't need humanitarian protection.
No, you don't need humanitarian protection.
So why are we giving humanitarian protection to people who are coming from France then, if France is a safe country? Can't you simply say you've been in a safe country, you're not fleeing a country that's not safe?
Yes, you can. You can do exactly that. The trouble is the French won't accept them back.
But if we did it offshore, they'd have to because they'd be there already.
Yeah, if we did it in France, yeah. So if we set up an asylum centre, let's say in Lille, in France, and we assess people there, we wouldn't be taking thousands of people. We would be taking very few people because there wouldn't be that.
How do you do? Okay, I like this idea, but how do you do the other side of the system? Don't people come across in the boats anyway, or do you then say, actually, if you come across in the boat, we're just going to send you back immediately anyway, and you'll never have asylum in this country? Is that the way you fix it from the other side?
Yeah, that would be the deal. If we go for this one in, one out deal, there are going to be vast numbers of people who do not qualify.
Yeah.
But they're still going to want to come to the UK. But because we've fingerprinted them, we've photographed them, we've biodated them, we've done everything, and we've shared that with the French, so the French have got the records as well. If that person then crosses the channel illegally, because he's already been told, no, he can't come, the French have got to take him back straight away. That's the stumbling block. I can't see that the French would be happy to do that.
Just going back to your first answer, which was no, for a little bit of expansion on that in regard to the TikTok aspect of this. Not just TikTok, but TikTok is the main platform. I'm talking about any social media where these gangmasters or their lackeys put this stuff online and say, come to Britain, Britain's great, come, you'll get asylum, come across in small boats, pay us a few £1,000 and come across. If you put that online, Yvette Cooper says she's coming for you, there's going to be a new offence, 5 years in prison. I mean, how on earth is that going to work? Are we going to see a raft of people extradited to the UK for putting ads on TikTok?
No, because you can only deal with TikTok that is broadcast in the UK. You can't deal with social media that is outside the UK without the agreement of the country that it's being broadcast in. So we couldn't prosecute people that are putting out social media about how wonderful it is in the UK in Iraq.
So it's just a completely pointless policy then?
Yes, completely. Completely.
So it's not even possible legally to say, right, what if you're in the UK and you put it on TikTok there and people then...
Right. If you do it in the UK, if you're a people smuggler based in the UK...
Which most of them aren't, yeah.
Yeah, as you say, which most of them aren't, then yeah, you stand the chance of being arrested and the full force of the law falling upon you. You'll go to prison for 6 weeks. You know. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, but this idea, it sounds great, but the implementation is going to be incredibly difficult if you are not in the UK. I mean, the days have gone when we used to rule the world and we used to tell the other countries what was going to happen. Now we don't. Kevin, they tell us.
Do you think the Conservatives? I'm saying absolutely. Conservatives, Lib Dems were part of the coalition for 5 years. Obviously, the Conservatives had a pretty dire record on all of this. I'm not saying for a second that they were any good at this. And I speak as someone who worked at the Home Office as a special advisor for a full 4 weeks. My question is about just the last year or so, Kevin. Do you think there's anything Keir Starmer has done that has made the problem better?
It's very difficult. If he's got a deal with the French to do more on the beaches, then I would say he's done well. I would congratulate him if he's done that. If the French will interfere with the migrants up to 300 metres off the French coast, then yes, that would be extremely helpful. If they are prepared to get their toes wet and slash the boats, as they've said they've promised to do, yes, then that would work. That would be good. But apart from that, Afraid not.
I'm just slightly tearing my hair out, Kevin, at some of the things you've said today. You've illustrated the point brilliantly well for me. I've learned a heck of a lot in the last 15 minutes. I've learned a lot of things I didn't know and probably should have known but didn't. It's just a dire situation, Kevin, isn't it? It's just absolutely complex, difficult, and those people who are protesting outside migrant hotels, I will make no excuses for those who are breaking the law, but I will absolutely stand up to my dying day for the right of people to protest peacefully, no matter what they're protesting about, even as things I completely disagree about in regard to pro-Palestinian protests, for example. But those people outside the hotels, what we've seen, the majority of them, vast majority, are peaceful people who are really concerned about their neighbourhoods. Do you think there's any connection between what those protesters want and what the government is going to do? Do you think they'll listen to them? Do you think they'll understand their concerns? Is the political will there to solve this problem?
I'm not certain it is. I mean, when we had the riots in Southport, was it last year?
They were in various places, but certainly it was sparked by what happened in Southport. Yeah,
we had some pretty serious riots. Then the Prime Minister moved incredibly quickly, didn't he, with prosecutions?
Yeah, that's right.
And he deserves credit for that. But it hasn't stopped people protesting. It's stopped them protesting violently or less violently, but it hasn't solved the problem.
And the problem is, Kevin, the problem is as well, is that, you know, you're praising the Prime Minister for doing that and for putting pressure on the Crown Prosecution Service, which he knows very well, former Chief Prosecutor of this country, as he tells us about 3 times a week. That's fine as it is, but the point is that we know that the political will existed from Keir Starmer then to solve that problem of people rioting, and I'm not in any way going to stand up for anybody who was breaking the law there. But what we don't see is the political will to solve a problem that would actually solve a major, major problem in our country. I mean, he could throw the kitchen sink at this. He could say, do you know what? We're going to do a Cobra every single day. We're going, you know, the Government's Emergency Committee, we're going to recall Parliament. We're going to talk about it. We're going to have Parliament on the Saturday. We're going to pass all the legislation we need to do. He could, in theory, do this. And migration is the number one issue for our viewers and listeners. It's the number one issue for the entire public in many polls, not every poll, but in many polls as well. The political will does not exist. He has awesome power, huge power as the Prime Minister of this country. He has a large majority. But he won't do it, Kevin. He won't do it.
He does, but the trouble is dealing with the left wing of the Labour Party. Who are not in favour of an awful lot of this. And if you look at the MPs, a number of the MPs that have been elected in certain parts of the country come from ethnic minorities, and they're dead against it as well.
Not every ethnic minority is against. I mean, Shimmy Lee, for example, was here. He's from an ethnic minority background. He was saying, let's sort this out, let's do this. And not every MP from an ethnic minority background is saying that as well.
No. What is interesting, Peter, and wasn't particularly highlighted, was the Afghan lady that was protesting, I think, middle of last week, saying that the British government had not helped her father come to the UK, and was demanding that we helped him. But she wasn't saying it was just her father she wanted brought to the UK.
Yeah.
It was her whole family. And it looked very much like it was her extended whole family.
Well, we know that the way many Afghans live is very different to the way we live. They live in kind of communities, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you're saying it's not just me, it's 22 of my family, that's a problem, which has been the case, and that certainly has been an issue. Kevin, listen, thank you. This has been one of the most interesting interviews I've done in a very long time. I've learned a heck of a lot from it. And you've got some really, really interesting opinions and expertise, and I thank you for it. That's Kevin Saunders there, who is former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. We'll take your calls, including Mark in Lincolnshire, in just a second, and plenty of voice notes coming up as well. Make your voice heard. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000.
this expenditure that this government goes out and says, you know, we're going to give this to Gaza, we're going to give this to the Palestinians. Everything that this government spends comes out of my pocket. But I'm not allowed to have a say anymore.
So
and
true,
this is what
true.
the government is trying to do. The censorship that's going on now is just unbelievable. I can't criticise Labour. What's going to happen at PMQs on a Wednesday?
Yeah.
If we can't criticise...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Dan, who says, if I was at a protest and encountered support for migrants, I'd get a counsellor to take down the names and addresses of these people and thank them for rehoming migrants and ask them how many they'd be able to take. I bet your bottom dollar they would suddenly back off. Really interesting one, for example, on the Gaza issue. I know I bang on about it quite a lot, but in Ireland, for example, they are going, oh, you know, we care so much about the people of the Middle East. Right, well, would you like to take some refugees from Gaza? Oh, no, we can't do that. No, we can't do that. Really interesting. How far will people go? Mark in Lincolnshire has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi, Mark.
Hi there. Yeah, just a few things, really. Brief as I can. Yeah, I mean, the whole situation, I mean, on a light note to start with, really, the whole thing about jailing people 5 years for small boat crossings. Well, the way justice works in this country, what will probably happen is some poor sod that runs a pedalo business on a lake will probably be banged up for 5 years. You know, that's just how it works anymore.
Or by the time they actually get to the trial, they've been remanded in custody for 5 years, whether they've done it or not.
Well, absolutely, you know. But my original point that I rang up about has kind of been usurped by a couple of things, really. I've got a homeless cat that I'm dealing with here as well that's distracted me. He's all sorted. What I'm going to do is talk about that guy that you were speaking to, one of your guests, that was basically accusing everybody far-right thugs. Do you remember that?
That was Andy Williams, who was on yesterday. We looked at that clip again today. It was over 24 hours ago, but still people pretty annoyed about it, Mark, including you.
I am pretty annoyed about it, Peter, because what I would like to see happen is people on the right that just are not far right, you know. But what we need to start doing is using the same kind of words against these people. Call them what they actually are, you know, because they are far left communists. That's what they are. They seek to destroy the country. Essentially, they want to destroy the West. That's their idea. That's the idea.
Andy Williams doesn't want to destroy the West.
Well, I'm not so sure, to be honest. You know, if you're pro-immigration, yeah, if you're pro-particularly illegal immigration, you know, and let's be honest, they bang on, don't they, about, you know, they have to have all the benefits in the world that we can possibly give them. You have to think why that is. You know, these people aren't stupid. Andy Williams isn't stupid, is he?
Certainly not.
You know, so why do you want to do that? Because all you're actually doing is accelerating the decline of the country at the end of the day. You're essentially collapsing the nation. That's what this does. So they can then bring in their ideology, which is the whole point. That's the whole existence of Antifa. That's their ideology. That's what they want to see. And Antifa, they're a joke in themselves anyway. The anti-fascists that, you know, practice anti-fascism by being fascists. You know, it's quite amazing, isn't it, really? You know, so I just think, you know, we need to call these people out for what they are.
Okay.
You know, at the end of the day. And that's how I see them. They're just far left commies, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. You know, they're a real problem in this country. You know, back in the day, back in the 80s and even 90s, we would have referred to them as subversives because that's what they are. You know, you get these NPCs that turn up at protests with their, you know, they've all got the same sign and everything, Peter. You know, refugees are welcome here and all this kind of crap. You know, sorry for that word.
It's okay.
You know, it's pathetic. I mean, the vast majority of the people that are turning up at these protests, they don't even know what they're protesting.
Yeah, and some of them are...
These signs, all they know is they want to stop the far right, you know, because they're so brain dead, these people. They just don't even know what they're signing up to. You know, and they'll happily mill around with, you know, masked up Antifa clowns. That, you know, it just frustrates the living hell out of me, Peter, because...
Well, Mark, I think a lot of people share your frustration. I think a lot of people really feel that way about this criticism and the fact that there are many, many legitimate, totally reasonable people who are on these protests who are worried about what is happening to their neighbourhood. I want to play a voice note now from Kitty in Kent. First of all, thank you to Mark for his call, and I want to play a voice note now from Kitty.
Morning, Peter. Kitty from Kent here. I just can't believe it. Every time I turn your show on, there's some unhinged, moronic lefty who clearly lives in an ivory tower, spurting out their ideological nonsense. It is not NIMBYism to not want rapists and people who are culturally different and inflict their culture on yours to change your area beyond doubt. It's not about house prices, for goodness sake. What an idiot. I assume he lives in Islington. This is about... absolute change in our society and the sort of running out of Britishness. Sorry, I'm so cross. Probably going to go over Tech Dave's 1 minute here, get into trouble. But what I would like to see happen to these people illegally coming into our country is they're put in some tented, gated area until they are deported back to where they came from, which was France, which is not war-torn. So off you go, and he can go with them as far as I'm concerned. These lefties are idiots, and they are the problem.
Kitty, thank you so much. Coming in at 56 seconds there, you had a leisurely 4 seconds to play with. The reason I sort of laughed slightly about Islington was just the irony. I mean, first of all, I think that's a perfectly legitimate point to make about James Bealby. I'm sure he would come back at you, but he's not here. But he made his points earlier, and Kitty's made her points. The point I would make about Islington is actually that is, believe it or not, is where the Thistle Hotel is, where this major protest was yesterday. So that's actually at the epicentre of all of this. But I totally get what Kitty's saying about people who she believes anyway are out of touch. And there are a lot of, I wouldn't say James Bealby is in this category, but there are an awful lot of people who have no conception of what it means when a load of people from a completely different culture move into your area and look down their long noses very snootily at people who are concerned about their community and say, actually, if you move in 300 people to a hotel, that's going to cause a few issues. It's going to put a bit of pressure on services, and there is a massive divide in this country from people who get that and people who don't get that. Lots more to discuss on this, as well as the Brexit issue. Dr. Rakib Hassan, one of my favourite guests, is with us in just a second. Stay with us, you're going to want to hear that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody who's been in touch. We'll take more of your calls, texts, tweets, voice notes, however you want to get in touch with us, telepathic messages, smoke signals, however that is. We will hear more from you in a minute. The person I want to hear from now is Dr. Rakib Ehsan. This is a really interesting survey. Usually we don't just do stuff based on, one poll, but it's in the Sunday Times today. It's a survey of more than 2,000 people, and the survey says that that about 29% of people would vote to leave the EU, compared to the 52%, of course, who voted leave at the time of the referendum in June 2016. Rakib, are you surprised at this?
I'm not necessarily surprised. I think first we have to make the point that the referendum on the UK's membership of the European Union, that was back in June 2016. We live in a different society. There has been demographic change. I think that there are a decent section of British voters who may have voted for Brexit back in June 2016 who are no longer with us. We know that there was a strong relationship between being of older age and the likelihood of voting for Brexit. So we have lots of young people which have joined the electorate who generally have more progressive liberal views, perhaps a more internationalist outlook. And I think that there are many problems that we've experienced in the post-Brexit era. I think the real issue here is that many of the freedoms that were gained as a result of leaving the European Union, such as having more national sovereignty and control over immigration, the government has not made the most of that. Indeed, we saw the liberalisation of immigration rules, post-Brexit immigration rules, under former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. So I think that any of the benefits that we may have had from Brexit, now that could have been possibly speeding our vaccine rollout and freeing ourselves from European level regulation. I don't think that we've really maximised those benefit figures.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because what I often say to people who voted Brexit, for example, including a number of people very close to me, and they voted for Brexit, I often wonder, do they feel we have taken back control of our laws, money and borders? It's rare to come across someone who says the Brexit we voted for is the Brexit, excuse me, that we've got. And actually it's been a success in the sense that, yes, we have left the EU, but then people see Keir Starmer, for example, going back. And I just wonder, with these numbers, we don't know why people are saying they would still vote leave, or that they would vote remain now if there were a referendum tomorrow, which there isn't. But we're in a position where we don't quite know what's going through people's heads. Are they saying they've changed their mind because they believe Brexit's been a failure, or are they changed their mind because of all the fallout, the consternation, the problems, or have they just thought, actually, it's maybe just not worth it if there was another referendum because the Brexit they voted for wasn't the one that was delivered?
Well, I think you need a more comprehensive survey to really understand the motivations behind people feeling a particular way when it comes to Brexit. And I think that there's a great deal of disillusionment in terms of the political establishment not being able to maximise those benefits of Brexit. But I do find interesting that also in this same poll, around 3 in 5 British people said that they were generally against leaving the ECHR. So I think that what it really shows is that there is still a decent chunk of the British electorate, which in my view, Peter, they are more internationalist in their worldview. And I think that there is that possibility that we have a tendency to blame supranational institutions for our problems, when I think many of the problems we have are very much closer to home. If we look at immigration and asylum policy, I think that our own domestic judiciary has been a very serious problem in terms of some of the court rulings they made when it comes to cases dealing with immigration and asylum.
And Nigel Farage has said the first thing he would do if Reform UK won an election would be to remove Britain from the European Convention on Human Rights. But actually this poll is suggesting this idea is not entirely popular. But then again, Nigel Farage doesn't need 50% of people to vote for him. No, he doesn't. In the same way as Keir Starmer has about a third of people who actually turned up and voted, which is about 20% of the country when you drill down the numbers in regard to that.
No, absolutely. And I think that ultimately Nigel Farage will be focused on the core preferences of his own base.
Of course. And why wouldn't he? Yeah.
And absolutely. And that is how political parties generally operate. And I think for me, what we're seeing here is that so far, if you look at our post-Brexit experience, it has not been a positive one, but that's not necessarily because we have withdrawn from the European Union. I think, to be honest, that's mainly down to many various failures, which are very much internal in my view.
Let me ask you about another story that is around today. This is Angela Rayner's department, the one I used to work at actually as a special advisor to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, spending thousands in taxpayers' cash on woke diversity training, £47,272 on a particular bit of coaching about decolonising the workplace, offering Inclusion Allies nearly £5,000 on a firm that advises on the dangers of banter at work. I mean, that just will not curry favour with many people.
No, absolutely not. I think this is a fundamental waste of taxpayers' money. If you look at the Employment Rights Bill, which the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has been heavily involved with, there are some good things in there. There's more family-friendly protections for British workers, making flexible working the norm, especially for new parents. But then you see that obsession with the unholy trinity of DEI, diversity, equality, and inclusion, where there's more rights for so-called diversity pilgrims who are members of trade unions. And I think that this also taps into that. I think that it's absolutely remarkable that instead of focusing on the bread and butter, it really is, I think, decolonising the workplace. This is absolute nonsense at the end of the day. By the way, we have some of the strongest anti-discrimination protections in the world. So I think that this idea, this constant push in terms of introducing more DEI measures for the workplace actually does more harm than good, because I think it actually encourages British workers to see themselves more based on their race, their ethnic identity, their religious affiliation, their sexual orientation, or indeed their gender identity, as opposed to actually just seeing themselves as part of a workplace where there should be common values and a single organisational mission that everyone can buy into.
Yeah, it's really interesting actually in regard to this, especially in regard to the website. They're providing tips on how to navigate the anti-woke backlash, suggesting baby boomers are anti-woke. I've sort of slightly picked that up. It states boomers may be uncomfortable with the rapid shifts in evolving language associated with being woke and have a nostalgia for values and beliefs of the past. I am not a baby boomer. I'm a millennial at the age of 41, and I basically believe that too. This is just a waste of taxpayers' cash, Rakib, isn't it?
Easily, listen, Peter, I recently turned 35, so I don't fall into that demographic bracket either. And I just think that when it comes to work, we need to focus on the bread and butter of really, firstly, trying to challenge our crisis of worklessness that we have in the country. I think many of our local communities are trapped in this vicious cycle of welfare dependency. And I think that when it comes to the workplace, I've given many talks on DEI in the workplace. I think what you need is to see those shared values, a sense of common purpose and mutual obligations, which tie together the workplace. And I think that encouraging people to see themselves as a member of a particular group, as opposed to being a member of a organisation that has a shared mission, I think that is unhelpful, and I think that's a divisive way of actually organising our economy more generally.
Rakib, as always, thank you. That's Dr. Rakib Ehsan, author and political commentator. Appreciate his contribution to the programme today. It doesn't look a day over 34. Thank you to everybody who has been in touch specifically about the issues we're talking about, that, and also talking about with Rakib and immigration as well. Barry says, diversity is such a strength that it requires constant propaganda to remind us of it and a police state to enforce it. That is a very fair point. L says, I would vote leave over and over again. Nothing to do with immigration. It was due to the EU Commission, these overpaid, privileged people. We also need to be out of the ECHR, the Convention on Human Rights, or fine-tune the laws that we adhere to. Thank you to this person who says, if immigration from mainly Muslim countries continues at the current rate, our hapless politicians won't be seeking a two-state solution in the Middle East, but a two-state solution in this country between Muslims and non-Muslim territories within 15 years. It is so obvious. Mike in Newcastle says, as regards illegal migration is concerned, you can be sure that nothing is going to be done about it. We are a small, overcrowded, almost bankrupt nation, and by the time even the left wake up to this, it will be far too late, says Mike in Newcastle. Plenty more views coming your way. Stay with us here on Talk.
expenditure that this government goes out and says, you know, we're going to give this to Gaza, we're going to give this to the Palestinians. Everything that this government spends comes out of my pocket. But I'm not allowed to have a say anymore.
So
and
true.
This is what
So
this
true.
government is trying to do. The censorship that's going on now is just unbelievable. I can't criticise Labour. What's going to happen at PMQs on a Wednesday?
Yeah.
If we can't criticise...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Andrew in Dorset, who's given me a shout on 0344 499 1000. Andrew, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to talk about this morning?
Thanks very much. First time caller. Love your show. You let me just turn that down. You talk a lot of sense. And
Thank you, and thanks for the call. I'm glad you picked up the phone.
Yeah, look, we run a small guest house in a seaside town in Dorset. I don't want to mention it for obvious reasons. People might know who I am.
Yeah.
Very popular, great seaside town, busy, packed, obviously, summer holidays. There was a massive pro-Palestine Gaza demonstration right on the town centre on Friday afternoon. No police around. They were banging pots and pans. They were disrupting the traffic. Now, the point that I want to make is I am actually half Palestinian. My mother is Palestinian. She's from Jaffa. I speak fluent Arabic. I am an Arabist. We've lived overseas. We've lived abroad. What we do not hear is the voices of those Arabs, the 2 million Arab Israelis, right, who maybe they could consider, but they consider themselves as naturalized Israelis, the Christian Lebanese Arabs, the Egyptian Arabs, people like myself. All we hear is, oh, Israel is the evil Antichrist. There have people been on the ground in Gaza. I have been to these places. I see exactly the reality of what the IDF do and how they behave and how they try to save lives and not kill lives. These people on the streets were absolute middle class, white, mainly women, literally spitting in your face, vile language, calling me a Nazi, and I speak fluent Arabic, and they don't understand.
Why were they calling you a Nazi?
Because I support Israel in this matter.
And did you tell them that?
I told them that very clearly. Strangely enough, the men themselves were quite, willing to have. In fact, most of them are wearing the wrong keffiyeh, which is quite amusing.
As Yasser Arafat did. Yeah, as Yasser Arafat did as well. Yeah, which I always find quite interesting.
Correct. So it made me laugh. But the thing is, these people are deluded. I actually called 999 because, imagine if there was an anti-immigrant protest, the riot police would have already been out there in force, ready to clamp it down. There wasn't one policeman around, and let me tell you what the locals thought of this demonstration. They were furious. I had 2 Jewish guests in my guest house who were too scared to go out of the building. That's how they felt. Yeah. Look, whether, of course, they weren't going to feel it wasn't going to be, oh, look, they're Jewish, we're going to attack them. No. But I don't understand. Everywhere you look, it is, there is a global concerted effort by every socialist left-wing movement, every trans rights thing is now Palestine flags. The doctors the other day, people wearing keffiyehs, wrong ones again, with anti-Israel slogans.
And I think there are many questions that can be asked of many of those protesters. They're entitled to protest if they're doing so peacefully. 100%. But my question is, where are the protests, where are the marches you're going on about the genocide in South Sudan? Where are the marches you're going on about the genocide in Nigeria, for example? Where is the concern for the Druze minority in Syria? What about Syria, where more Muslims have been killed than anywhere else in the Middle East? And the answer to that question, Andrew, is that Israel is always wrong. Israel, no matter what Israel does, there's a caller to this station. His name is Khaled, and he rings in every now and again and tells me why I'm wrong in the Middle East, and that's fair enough. And I asked him a few days ago, I said, since the establishment of the Israeli nation in 1948, can you name me one thing they have done that is right? And he couldn't. And the point is, and the nuance in all of this, and the nuance will have been lost on so many people. For example, 75% of people in Israel want the war to end.
Yes.
Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't, for lots of purposes, and he's under a lot of political pressure. We talk all about that. You know this back to front, Andrew. But the thought that everyone in Israel isn't wrong about everything would not enter the minds, or that there's any nuance to this or any debate even within Israel, which let's remember is a democracy, would not enter the minds of most of those protesters.
But here's the thing. First of all, 1947, there was a two-state solution, which Israel quite happily agreed to, and the UN said, yes, let's go ahead. But guess who didn't want it? It was the so-called Palestinians and the Arabs that then went to war. And every opportunity they've had, they've managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. This is a classic Palestinian thing. 92% was given to them, Arafat turned it down. But that's by the by. There is a massive, as you know, and I know, sorry, I get a bit emotional about
That's okay, you take your time. You're doing well, Andrew.
Thank you. There is a massive, as we know, Muslim population in the UK. We know, I also lived and worked in Pakistan. They are probably the most vitriolic anti-Semites there are on the planet. This is a fact. Pakistan is one of the drivers of this. I saw it, and they will not accept Israel. If in all of these conversations, even when Starmer flip-flop and doesn't really know what he's doing about Palestine and Israel, even then, I have not yet heard anybody say, okay, fine, you've put these conditions on Israel, we get it. Why don't you also say that you will amend your constitution, the Palestinians, and say, we will accept to live next to Israel peacefully for the rest of our lives and put our weapons down?
And that is a very good point, Andrew. And the point I would ask is, there are a number of nations and there are a number of peoples and collections of peoples like those in the Palestinian territories who don't properly recognise Israel. Now, you can have an argument about Fatah, which sort of does but also doesn't. But the question is, as well, and I don't think Labour have answered this, if there are still hostages being held in Israel by the UN in September, are you going to recognise a state of Palestine? And there is absolutely no incentive for Hamas to do anything.
Well, Hamas yesterday went and said, well, we're not going to put our... They saw what Starmer did and Macron in Canada. They said, oh, goody, so we can play the game now till September. And now Starmer... can see this, and I'm so pleased that somebody like yourself, who you know your knowledge on this subject, and it's a pleasure to hear some balance and some...
well, I think, and the irony is, Andrew, you know more about and care more about the Palestinian people than many people on that protest because you understand this issue. Everybody wants peace in the Middle East. Everybody wants the innocent, I'll cry no tears for Hamas, but for terrorists, but everybody wants the innocent people, the starving people. There's clearly humanitarian crisis. We want them to have food. We want them to be okay. We want them to live fulfilled lives, ideally in a democracy or at least a stable state. And that nuance, that level of any basic information apart from Israel's dreadful and awful people and every Israeli is awful, that is completely lost in this argument.
Spot on. One, if I may, one further thing this morning, I happened to unfortunately turn on to BBC Breakfast. GB News went off the air, funny enough, a couple of times they've done that. And the lady presenting... she was an Irish lady, not Northern Irish, Republic of Irish, a so-called investigative journalist.
Right.
She was going on about the shooting of this child and an adult, but the tone in which the whole thing was done, it was, well, guilty, Israel we know is guilty, they definitely did do this, although this is a very grainy picture and we can't really tell. And the whole tone from her was bad Israel, killing citizens again. And they managed to bring on pathologists from Scotland and Ireland or whatever, who again, oh yeah, well we know that Israel's guilty. And yet, anybody who looks at the picture to tell, well, hang on a second, what are you seeing here?
Well, I didn't see that, Andrew, but certainly I think there are many, many questions to answer of the BBC, of their reporting. I think there's a lot of bias there, and there have been a number of reports into this as well. Andrew, thanks for your call. Really interesting to talk to you. I know it's your first call. Don't make it your last. Ring me anytime. I want to speak to Anne in Sussex now about the EU and about Brexit, and this survey today in the Sunday Times saying that if the 2016 Brexit referendum were held today, how would you vote? 52% of people say remain, 29% of people say leave. Anne, what is your perspective on all of this?
Well, from what I've heard in the past few weeks, and I've heard quite a lot from various quarters, when Brexit was such a success, which of course wasn't what the EU wanted, and I think other countries as well. I don't think Obama wanted it, did he? But
I say he said would be at the back of the queue, didn't he?
Yeah, this is deliberate policy. A lot of things going on now. I think people need to really wake up and smell the coffee is an expression I think people use. But when Brexit came to a success, Klaus Schwab, who was the head of the Economic Forum, which he founded for over 50 years and was the head, we came out as fourth in, the most successful financial nations. And I understand that he ordered the people around him to kill it, so that we looked as if it was total failure, and we ended up eighth in the economic nations. And that was deliberate. And it's almost...
I don't know about the facts of that necessarily, Anne. I've no reason to disbelieve you. I'm just saying I'm just not familiar with that story. But what I absolutely know, Anne, is that there are many, many attempts at various times for to stop us leaving on our own terms, and indeed to stop us carrying out the will of the people. As I said earlier in the programme, I voted Remain. I got over that in about an hour and said, right, democracy has happened here. We asked people what they thought. They've told us. Implement this and get on with it.
Well, I will tell you, Peter, that because I was dealing with some residence issues, I actually didn't vote at all.
Right.
But I did know about the rape of Europe and what was going on in Europe and how it was formed, and how I was led to believe that Hitler's right-hand man almost planned it, and Arafat's uncle was there when Europe was planned. But the point is that now I'm urging you and everybody else to look at what the Lucas Trust are doing, because it is to get rid of Christianity, Judaism, and to actually impoverish and destabilize the West.
Okay.
I don't feel I'm an expert on anything or everything, but I would urge people to start looking and finding out for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're
a lot of things going on that we are not meant to be learning anything in this country in the next few years.
Anne, thank you for your thoughts there. That's Anne in Sussex there. Certainly support her call there to educate ourselves about all these things. Critical thinking is so incredibly important. Wherever you read something, whatever you hear, including in this station, just think, why is that person saying that? What's the agenda? Why are they coming up with this opinion? I try to be as honest and straightforward with you as I possibly can on every single issue. That's sometimes painfully so, sometimes to my detriment. But I think Anne is absolutely right. You just got to keep your critical thinking, no matter what you're watching, no matter what you're listening, no matter what you're reading, wherever you go on the internet, you've got to keep your critical thinking at all times. Loads of people have got in touch on migration and indeed Brexit. Let's hear a voice note now from Jeff on migration.
Morning, Peter. Great show. Jeff in Birmingham. Colonel Gaddafi said just before his death, I believe, we will invade your countries without firing a single shot. Look what's happening. Cheers, Peter.
Thank you. Let's hear from another Peter on...
Hi, Pete. Pete in Manchester. Great show. On the subject of if there was another Brexit referendum, I would vote to remain. I would definitely vote to remain in the EU for the main reason that it would make it easier for me to escape this cesspit of a country. That's the only reason I'd vote remain, so I could get the hell out of here. Great show. Thanks. Bye.
Well, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on that, Peter. I think a lot of people feel that way. I keep hearing from people who want to escape this country who are not happy with what's going on. Let's hear another voice note now for Colin.
Morning, Peter. It's Colin from Southend.
Please answer my question. Labour are treating us all with absolute total contempt. Keir Starmer lying even in the House of Commons, in Parliament, to other MPs. Why is the King letting his government treat his subjects in this way? Can't he, as the King and the overall leader, dissolve this government? Or is he scared of reform as well? Bye.
Colin, thanks for that. The short answer, and I literally have 15 seconds before the news here, the short answer is the King can't really do that. It's got to be the Prime Minister asking him to dissolve Parliament. There's a longer answer coming your way, and I want your views on all of this. 0344 499 1000.
We've just been talking in the office here about how many of us have been attacked at some point or other by some form of flying beast or any wildlife. I mean, so we'll take your stories this morning.
Hello, this story is concerning wildlife. It's concerning a rhino.
A rhino? Blimey.
Right? Yeah,
okay.
rhino. I used to live in Kenya when I was about 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
And we were in this wildlife park in a grey Morris Minor. This rhino started chasing us. There's me and my sister in the back seat.
Right.
It was like something out of Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We were turning around saying, "Believe it, Dad. Just put your foot down, Dad. We're in a field. Put your foot down." This rhino was chasing us.
One from Mark here in Derby. Went on holiday for our first romantic holiday to Tunisia years ago. Decided to take my girl into a petting zoo. I got a bag of food to feed the animals. A giant goat then went for me, putting its front legs over my shoulders and proceeding to headbutt me over a fence into one of the pens, covering me in the food and making my nose bleed. I got out of the pen, then the goat and all his mates attacked me again, sending me running and screaming like a girl out of the zoo, with my girlfriend rolling with laughter on the floor.
A tarantula climbed up the bottom of the bed on the sheet.
Yeah.
And it walked all the way up. It's eyeball to eyeball.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, what am I going to do when it climbs over my face? But then a miracle happened. It raised its 2 front legs and waved them around. And then it turned around and walked down the side of the sheet.
Boris Johnson been attacked by an ostrich. The former PM was enjoying a safari trip with his family when the bird leaned into his car and went oi oi and pecked his hand. In footage shared online, he quickly jerked from the ostrich, don't dirty minds away from the ostrich, and shouted, "Oh, cripes, get hell," before driving off. And so I just set it out there. Have you been attacked by an animal? When I was about 7, says Trevor Jenkins, on holiday in Spain in the 70s, a monkey pulled my long hair. It was long because it was the 70s. I was in floods of tears. And as the family car drove out the car park, an elephant ripped off the car mirror. We got the message. Spanish animals aren't to be trusted. Jeremy, Brittany here from the United States. I was spurred by a rooster in my right foot a few years ago. Spurred? How do you get spurred by a rooster?
One here from Dan in Hampshire. Morning, Mike. Is an Aussie that has been dive bombed by our version of the Magpie, which is much bigger, every springtime.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We're talking about migration today, about those protests that have happened over the past 24 hours in various places, Newcastle, London, a couple in London actually, Manchester as well. We're also talking about how the government wants to attempt to solve the problem of migration. 2 new bits of legislation, or a plan anyway today, one on processing, one on another aspect of smashing the gangs. We've got an expert in the studio, Amar Johal, who's a lawyer at the Prosperity Institute. We'll talk to him in a second. We'll get your thoughts on all of this as well, and we'll talk a little bit later on about fears Hamas may unleash terror in the UK. and indeed their refusal to disarm until a Palestinian state is established. More vandalism as well at an aircraft in RAF Bryce Norton. We'll talk about that with the security expert Will Geddes a little bit later on. As always, I want your opinion on everything. This is my show, but it's your show too. I want to make sure we get as many calls, texts and tweets on the air as possible, as well as those voice notes. Less than a minute, please. You can ring me, you can send me a voice note. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Voice notes, WhatsApp text messages and phone calls can all be put through on 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with me here on Talk. Well, let's play a few voice notes just before we speak to Amar Johal. Say hello to Amar anyway. Great to have you in the studio again. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Peter. Yeah, great.
There's a lot to discuss, and we have a lot of strong views on this from our viewers and listeners. Maybe get your reaction actually to what a few of them are saying. I want to hear a voice note from Jason.
Morning, Peter. Jason from Whitby. This migrant crisis gone on far too long. Years. Many years. Too many of them here now. Nobody, not even Farage, is going to be able to sort this problem out. We're stuck with another, 3-4 million people here that we don't want? Never going to happen. Face of England, the landscape's going to be changed forever. Another 4 years of this? Oh, my word. Cheers, pal.
Thank you, Jason. Let's hear from Gary.
Stop all these hotels now. Start building detention centres. Get them all in porta cabins. Comfortable as we can get them. But no hotels, no housing. Get them detained.
And finally from Dave.
Good morning, Peter. Dave here. These two guys you got on, they're sensible, intelligent chaps. How can you clear a backlog when they're still coming in at 50,000 a year? How are you going to clear the backlog? The only way to clear it is stop the boats at source. Just do it. They need a government pair of goonies to do it. And as for Andy Williams yesterday, I think he should go back to singing, mate, because he's not very good. Thank you.
Andy Williams continuing at 6 minutes past 12 to annoy people, even though he spoke to us over 24 hours ago. He had his free speech, you've had your free speech. Amar Johal, lawyer at the Prosperity Institute. Let me just put a couple of those points to you. Let's talk about what Dave said at the end there about this whole issue of processing, something the government says it wants to sort out. Tell us what the government has proposed, and then maybe within your answer you could answer what Dave said there about how do you even begin to process people when the boats are still coming.
Yes, so in terms of what Yvette Cooper has proposed, it's to try and get asylum decisions made more quickly. And we know that the decisions are only the first step in the process, because then that leads to appeals, and leads to further appeals, and then once all appeals are exhausted, in many cases they're still not deported out of the country. But basically they're trying to apply stricter time limits to prevent, once a decision's been made, it not taking up to a year to get an initial court decision, which then goes to a further appeal and can go to a further appeal after that.
If you're essentially saying that they're going to try to do things faster, can the court system even cope with that? It's straining under the pressure of so many different things, isn't it?
Yes, no, that's a great point. Just applying arbitrary time limits on top of already strained resources, where, as the callers are saying, more people are arriving and adding further strains to that, is why the asylum system is a breaking point. And the callers are correctly pointing out that even with an effective deterrent in place where the boats are stopped, there is a huge backlog to be dealt with, and that's why people are sceptical that any politician can grip that.
And we're in a situation where we're having hundreds of people arriving, not every day, but most days. We've had nearly 1,000 people arriving one day last week. That is a lot faster than the processing is going to work, even if it's at top speed.
Yes, absolutely. And so it leads to a situation where there's constantly additional backlogs, and it's greater pressure on Home Office decision makers to quote-unquote clear the backlog, which essentially means granting asylum status in most
So they
cases.
could actually be under pressure to clear the backlog, sort the processing. The easiest thing, presumably, is to say, let's just give them asylum or some form of status, whether on humanitarian grounds.
So, I mean, Labour's big plan, it appears to be, now that Smash the Gangs has failed, is try and disperse people through the accommodation system, through local authority accommodation, and through different parts of the welfare state, so people don't notice in the same way people will notice if there's illegal migrants or asylum seekers housed in a hotel in their constituency or in their local community. I think Labour's basically trying to disperse things and quantum it down.
Hide the problem?
Basically, yeah.
And in terms of that dispersal into houses of multiple occupancy, social housing and so on, I mean, people are going to notice that too. They're maybe not notice it because not everybody is in exactly the same place. It's one house which maybe has 6 people in it, and then one house maybe in the next street, and so on, rather than a hotel that has literally hundreds of people in it very, very visibly. But that's going to put huge pressure on social housing as well. They're just transferring the problem, aren't they?
Yes, correct. And it's not like the local authorities. In fact, Keir Starmer was put in front of a Commons committee and had this question posed to him about where is the additional, if you're take a step back, the reason why the Home Office is using hotels in the first place is there's inadequate accommodation available for asylum seekers pending a decision on their case. Labour are trying to speed that up and get the decisions made quickly, and then it was put to Keir Starmer, okay, so the decisions will be made, is there additional accommodation in those situations where you're moving people from temporary Home Office support into some element of the housing benefit system? It's the same supply of accommodation in those cases. So yeah, you're right, that's window dressing.
And again, he of course poo-pooed that and said, oh, there's plenty of accommodation.
Yeah,
when everybody, I mean, a blind man on a galloping horse knows that there isn't.
Correct.
There is a massive housing crisis in this country in both the social and the private sector, and has been for years. It was a bizarre thing to say.
Yes. Absolutely bizarre thing to say, and he was pushed by Meg Hillier, who is chairing that committee, to give examples and promise to follow up in writing. And I'm sure we'll await that with interest.
With great interest,
yes.
With great interest, certainly. In regard to this idea of people on TikTok or other social media being arrested, being charged, being sent to prison for 5 years, is that going to work?
No.
Why not?
So it's already a criminal offence to facilitate illegal entry into the United Kingdom. The Home Office admits in that same press release that the National Crime Agency have been working since 2021 to get advertisements or social media posts on Instagram or TikTok advertising these services and basically pointing to the generosity of accommodation once you reach the UK. So this is, I think it's an attempt within the constraints that Labour, as your callers pointed out, have set, which will stop them fundamentally tackling the problem, to chase a quick press release to deal with a narrative that's getting out of control with some of the protests we've seen around hotels housing asylum seekers, when I'm sure you've been in those meetings probably more than me, that in their heart of hearts Yvette Cooper and political advisors around her know that this isn't even going to be a good headline, let alone a policy solution to the problem.
I totally agree with you, and there's often pressure politically to say do something, and the answer no politician wants to give is, well, do you know what, the law's there already, we're just not really implementing it particularly well. And you know, you've been you talked about my expertise. In regard to your expertise, you've been a government lawyer, you know the law backwards on this particular issue. The fact is, as you've just pointed out a few seconds ago, the law is there already to deal with this. This is pointless, isn't it?
It's completely pointless. So even if we park repealing the Human Rights Act, leaving the ECHR, some of the things that Labour administration is not currently considering, and look at the things that they are prepared to consider, and they've talked about trying to speed up decision making, trying to reduce appeals and limit standalone ECHR grounds to remain. That's particularly Article 8, European Convention on Human Rights, which protects your right to private and family life. And in some cases where you don't have a case to remain because you're at risk of persecution, you can say, I've been living in the UK for so long that it would disrupt my family life for me to be deported. Labour have talked about addressing some of those issues. That's not in the bill. That's not the amendment. The bill it was billed as the counter-terrorism powers being applied to smash the gangs, and so it's mostly a hodgepodge of criminal offences to give. Probably in some areas, immigration and police enforcement don't have those powers, but largely they do have them. There's just fundamental problems structurally with the immigration and asylum system. So basically they're adding another bit of window dressing, another sticking plaster on top of a fundamentally inadequate bill to solve the situation, trying to control the narrative and chase a good headline.
You're a former government lawyer, you're now a lawyer at the Prosperity Institute, you're clearly a very smart guy. I just wonder, when you look at how these protests are happening, developing, increasing, vast majority of people peaceful, although there were 15 arrests over the past 24 hours. When you see what's happening in Manchester, in London, different parts of London as well, I just wonder what goes through your mind, knowing the asylum system as you do. You clearly have many frustrations with it. Do you understand those people on the street, on their concerns?
Yeah, and they have an intuitive understanding of what's going wrong, which cuts through these, I'd say, occasionally misleading things the government puts out about tackling the problem. Small boats have been going since 2018. In the early 2020s, when the hotels first started being dramatically used as contingency accommodation, governments first tried to address the narrative, and then Rishi Sunak promised to stop the boats, and Keir Starmer parked the Rwanda deterrent but promised to smash the gangs. Both were fundamentally inadequate straplines if they weren't prepared to do what it takes to implement either of those two things. And that is why the public is deeply frustrated, because they know that they have been misled on this by what government action is, the gap between what government action is proposed to achieve, what it'll actually achieve. And as you say, a lot of ordinary people, you see that in the callers as well, are starting to say, I'm not prepared to sit back and watch this happen in my local community, because one of the things about hotels, as you said earlier, is it becomes a focal point for frustrations. And the subtext to a lot of the coverage is it's the far right, it's people who are racist, who are unwelcoming. I think my experience has always been this is a deeply welcoming and tolerant people, but people can only take so much.
Were you born in this country?
Yes.
Yeah, you were anyway.
Born and raised in London, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I thought so. I don't want to put you on the spot, and it's absolutely fine to say no.
Yeah.
But I'd like to keep you for another 10 minutes or so to talk about Brexit, particularly, and what's happening with that. There's a very interesting discussion today that we're having with a lot of our viewers and listeners about Brexit. A few more voice notes I might play you as well. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, we're going to stay with Amr. Thank you. We're going to stay with Amr across the break. Amr Johal, lawyer at the Prosperity Institute. And if you have any questions from a legal perspective, or how this legislation works, or why we can't do certain things, just give us a shout. 0344 499 1000. I will be with Amr after the break here on Talk.
Keep hearing that Lucy Connolly is a martyr who is in prison to somehow represent all of these people. She's got 20 months left in prison. I hope she serves every single one of them. She's exactly where she deserves to be. She's the standard bearer for the far right, and I think
Andy, that's outrageous. That is an outrageous suggestion.
I'm sorry.
How can you call someone a thug when not a single arrest has been made at Epping, at Waterlooville? You're calling people thugs, and actually what they're doing is protesting peacefully.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Amar Johal is still with me. He's a lawyer at the Prosperity Institute. Really interesting talking to you this morning. Thanks for joining us, this afternoon now. And Brexit is one of the big topics we're talking about today. A big survey in the Sunday Times newspaper about this today, saying that only 29% of people would now vote leave. You've been giving us your thoughts on this. Carl in Tamworth says, Peter, I'd vote leave again and again and again. Wayne says, back in 2016, my wife and I voted to remain. And at that time, we were unfortunately those that just watched and listened to mainstream media. Since then, generally post-COVID, we have educated ourselves, and if there was another referendum, we would 100% vote leave. We're aghast at the number of people in this country who still don't get it. Anne says, Peter, why did you vote Remain, and would you do so again? Well, let me just answer that before I speak to Amar. Yes, I did vote Remain. I voted Remain for two main reasons. One was nobody was talking about Northern Ireland. It's been, despite the efforts of some very, very good people, it is a mess in regard to how Northern Ireland's relationship with the EU is now. It was for years, and was probably the toughest, most difficult part of Brexit in a much forgotten part of the United Kingdom. And secondly, much overlooked part of the United Kingdom as well. And secondly, George Osborne scared me. George Osborne said, you know, we're going to lose loads of our economy, the City of London's going to die, we're going to have all these sorts of problems, there won't be any jobs, we'll be totally isolated. And all of that was nonsense. And it goes back to one of my key beliefs about most things that are wrong in our society and wrong in my lifetime go back to the decisions either of George Osborne or Tony Blair, is my strong view on that. Would I do so again? No, I wouldn't actually. And the way the European institutions treated us, the arrogance, the obstacles they put in our way, the lack of cooperation, the just shameful behaviour by many in Europe would mean that I would vote leave. And there was a time, actually, I've said this before today, but had there been a second referendum, I would have campaigned for leave. Not just because of that, but because I believe in democracy. And you either believe in democracy or you don't. And the beauty of democracy is that you can make decisions and wars don't break out. You know, you make a decision, you disagree with it. I got over it in about an hour. I was reporting on it at the time. I got over it. I was just like, okay, fine, let's do this. Let's get on with this. And it took many, many years. Amar Johil's still with me, lawyer at the Prosperity Institute. What do you make of the findings of this poll? Only 29% of people will vote leave.
So I think you always have to take polls like this with a fairly small sample with a pinch of salt, because it depends on who's being asked what precise question with what framing. But overall, I think there is some polling about regret as a phenomenon.
Regret. Yeah, okay.
And that is, I think, because the failures on immigration of the Boris Johnson government post-2020 has been tied in the minds of the public with Brexit, where a lot of people who voted leave on immigration grounds, and that was to tackle non-EU as well as EU immigration, have had what they took as an implicit promise of all that fundamentally betrayed, and are rightly upset about all of that. And as you say, aspects of Brexit have not gone particularly well, particularly around Northern Ireland. So, you know, you can understand why people have changed their mind to the extent that they have.
Yeah. I want to play a few voice notes. I want to start with Robert, actually. He's only sent a nice brief message, 17 seconds. We try to get our voice notes on that are less than a minute, and he's done 17 seconds. Robert's voice note is first.
Good morning, Peter. It's Robert from Nottingham. Great show. Well, we never had Brexit. That's my point. We haven't had a proper Brexit. So, really, we've been badly let down by successive governments on this. Not sure what we can do about it, though.
We'll hear from Sharon in a second with her voice note, but a lot of people feel that way.
Yep.
Amber, what do you make of that sentiment?
Yes, so I think there's probably a few areas we've addressed the immigration, but where people don't feel that Brexit has properly been implemented, and one of those is our relationship with the EU. And in particular, the fact that because Northern Ireland has de facto been left in the single market with its rules and regulations on goods and trade, the rest of the United Kingdom has to comply with that or see a barrier between GB and Northern Ireland. And so on the quiet, for years, government has been implementing EU product and regulation standards for noble but not particularly democratic reasons of trying to reduce trade barriers between GB and NI. And so a lot of the deregulatory promises that have been made haven't happened. Yeah. And likewise with our trade deal that we agreed, and it was certainly, Lord Frost's deal was certainly a lot better than Theresa May's proposed deals, etc. But that has tied us into ongoing what's called level playing field compliance with EU regulation in a whole range of areas, and it's poorly understood, but it restricts our ability to change things and diverge. Yeah,
regulatory divergence. Martine Summers from Portland and Dorset says, my vote to leave the EU was the right one at the time, I still believe, but the broken promises since then make me want to rejoin so I can leave England and live in Europe away from Starmer before he ruins this country completely. Let's hear what Sharon has to say.
Great show as usual. Peter, these people need to stop going on about Brexit. The British public have awoken. We know it wasn't Brexit that's caused this to the country. It was our political elite who've let the country down, doing what they want to do for their own votes. Everybody knows this Labour government are not on the British side. They just want the Muslim vote, and everybody knows that, and they're selling our country down the river. And yet when it comes to November, they'll stand there with the wreaths at the cenotaph. They are a disgrace. My dad who fought for this country and my granddad will be turning in the graves. What they are doing to this country and what they've done to this country are a disgrace. What government lets criminals in every day? We don't know the history. He puts them in 4-star hotels. He's meant to protect us and call us all far right. He is an absolute disgrace, like the rest of the politicians who are letting the country down. All they're interested in is the salary and the Muslim vote. Listen to me now, everybody knows what you're all about. And this country is finished unless everybody votes for reform. They're our only chance to get Great Britain back to being great again. It's an absolute disgrace, Peter. It really is.
Sharon, thanks for your thoughts. Let's hear from Margaret on Brexit.
Hi Peter, it's Margaret from the northeast here. It's such a shame Brexit hasn't been implemented properly. Already we can see that Mr Starmer's closer alignment policies mean we need to take and follow EU rules. There have been benefits, and there could be more benefits of Brexit if only we had politicians and civil servants who would for once do as they are asked by the people. I'd still vote leave. Now more than ever we need to remain sovereign. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've had quite a number of questions come in for you, Amber. If I can just put these to you. You're in the hot seat now with all these different questions. Well, I'm sure you'll be able to deal with them. First of all, Gerald in Bournemouth simply says, the guy you've got on now from the Prosperity Institute is really great. He talks sense and he answers the questions. So there we are. That's the first one. Paul G in Dunoon says, for your guest, if a boat operated by a charity rescued a migrant boat and returned it to France, would this be okay? Legally? The French would have to accept it, but yeah, legally that would be okay. Okay. So maritime law requires charities, including the RNLI, to rescue people whose life is at danger at sea, but we've seen that that's ended up them being de facto used as a taxi service by aggressive criminal smuggling gangs. I think the way to address that is not necessarily
going at the RNLI specifically, it's the legal framework they operate in. I also think that the fundamental problem with returning boats to France, which we rarely address, the elephant in the room, is that requires some level of political agreement from the French, which is currently lacking.
Tracy in Wakefield says, Amar, I would like to ask, why can we not turn off legal aid for these people or even limit it to one appeal? I don't believe the rest of Europe offer aid like this to illegal immigrants. Thank you, says Tracy in Wakefield.
Yes, so Tracy is spot on, and what could be it's related quid pro quo to the French in terms of greater cooperation on returning boats is the French see us as a soft touch, as the rest of Europe, and Labour, even within the constraints that they've set, could address the pull factors and the generosity of support that we give to asylum seekers, and in addition to the generous legislative requirements on government to support asylum seekers, the Home Office interprets them generously. So there's nothing in law that says contingency accommodation has to be a 4-star hotel in one of the nicest neighbourhoods in London, the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf. That's a decision that the Home Office have chosen to do. Wouldn't even need legislation to fix that, to take a different decision, but I guess there is some limit on what accommodation they can find or how they've operationally decided to deal with that. And legal aid is another example where, was it Tracy, has said that legal aid has been very much restricted for UK nationals on a whole range of areas, and it's had harmful effects for people's access to justice and the functioning of courts. But one area where it's not been restricted is people who've arrived illegally who are claiming asylum.
One more, Amar, and then we'll let you go. I'm really, Lizzie from Telford says, I'm really interested in what the knowledgeable and insightful Amar Johal has to say. I'm just wondering, are the drivers of illegal boats arrested upon arrival? And if not, why not, says Lizzie?
No, because they're not identifiable. So one of the problems with the smash the gang strategy and adding all these criminal offences around facilitation of illegal immigration is that it's quite difficult to identify the perpetrators. And so it's led to something like 1%, based on recent statistics, of arrivals are charged with some offence related to trafficking.
So hold on. 1%?
Less than 1%, yeah.
Of people who arrive or drivers of the boats?
It's in the hundreds, and arrivals are in the thousands. We're up to 25,000 this year.
Form of facilitation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because
so
there was an attempt in 2023 to criminalise make it legal. It wasn't a criminal offence, but to arrive illegally, as it should be. I mean, that's implicit in the statement. But to say you can't get any asylum, refugee or other legal status to stay if you've arrived illegally. That was Suella Braverman's 2023 Illegal Migration Act. Now, that was never implemented. Labour were appealing that as part of their bill. So the actual act of arriving in most cases is not considered, if you claim refugee status or asylum status, certainly not criminal, and in most cases not even considered as illegal immigration in terms of the actual sort of technical way it's dealt with within the system. And the bigger problem is that the gangs are operating transnationally. So the people who've arrived are very rarely the sort of kingpins and linchpins.
Yes, of course, there'll be someone low down the chain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So whoever you're prosecuting is not the person who's in most cases.
And they'll get another driver of the boat as soon as that person's prosecuted.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Amar. I've learned a lot. Really appreciate that.
Do you have 5 seconds to address some of the Brexit stuff?
Of course, go ahead.
I think it was maybe Margaret on the call who was talking about not just was Brexit not done properly.
Go ahead,
but which we addressed, but what is the current government undoing
go ahead.
Bringing with close relationships to the EU. So the stuff that is within the Brexit reset deal that von der Leyen and Starmer have negotiated in 2 areas is potentially hugely damaging for even a future government. So on energy prices, they're bringing us back into the EU's emission trading scheme, which sets a ceiling for carbon prices and will essentially make our energy more expensive as part of the headlong run towards net zero. And if there is any closer alignment with EU law, it's the ECHR and EU law are very closely entwined. So we'll once again, by signing up to, as we have in Northern Ireland already, common EU asylum procedures before further restricting our ability to deal with the boats.
It's going to store up problems
Yeah,
in the future.
It's a sleight of hand to say we're more closely collaborating with France through this deal, but then if actually you're more closely aligning to the EU's legal framework.
Wow, my goodness, thank you so much. I've learned an awful lot. There's a lot that's very concerning about what you're saying, but you're giving us a really good insight as well. That's Amar Johal, who's a lawyer at the Prosperity Institute. Not the last time you'll be on my programmes, Amar, let me tell you. Thanks also to Lizzie, who asked that question. He also says, thanks for being amazing. I'm your biggest fan, size-wise. Lizzie, I'm sure that's not the case. Lizzie in Telford. As I often say when I'm tucking into a donut, there's just more to love. Anyway, Amar, thank you very much to this. Amar Johal. We're going to talk to Will Geddes in just a second. There have been more attacks on RAF planes. Maybe it's Palestine action, maybe it's not, we don't know. Also fears Hamas may unleash terror in the UK. That's the front page of the Sunday Express today. I'll get Will's assessment of all of that. Lots to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. And if you want to get your call in, your voice note in, or send me a message, 0344 499 1000 for those three things. If the message is, of course, a WhatsApp, or you can send me a text message, 87222, with the word talk in your text. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots more to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Thank you to Cliff in Berkshire, who says, Peter, great show. I voted no to joining in the first place and leave in 2016. I would still vote leave and expect them to actually do it, says Cliff in Berkshire. So thank you to that. Ian in York says, you suggested that moving immigrants to housing from hotels is transferring the problem. It's not. They're consolidating it. They will never be able to be moved or returned once given housing. This government is smashing the social cohesion of this country on purpose. They're re-engineering our society into something hideous. I want to talk about a story on the front page of the Sunday Express today. This is fears Hamas may unleash terror in the UK. Activists ready to radicalise Britons by exploiting the growing sympathy for the plight of Gaza. This is a report that says Hamas terrorists may increasingly pose the same threat in the UK as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Sir Keir Starmer has been warned by the Commissioner for Countering Extremism. This is fears the war in Gaza could inspire more extremists to commit atrocities. The terror group's leaders could radicalise Westerners sympathetic to the Palestinian cause and exploit differences in how Hamas is perceived compared to other organisations. I want to talk to Will Geddes about this. He is a security expert. Will, how big a threat is this?
It's a huge threat. And it's something which has been growing for a considerable amount of time. Something that we know very, very well, Peter, is that Iran has been very directly involved in trying to skew social media, to try and stir up pro-Palestine support in various different capacities. And this extends to all their proxies, and especially Hamas.
And, I mean, Hamas has certainly been severely weakened in the Middle East. What will it do in regard to the UK? Are there people here already who are from the Middle East, who've been sent here by Hamas to radicalise people? Are there people who've been radicalised here already. We know, of course, there's far too much sympathy and far too many people who are going on these pro-Palestinian marches, not all of them, but some of them who are, of course, pro-Hamas, which is illegal by itself. And have the authorities got any grip on this?
Well, firstly, I mean, that's an awful lot to unpack, Peter. I mean, I would start off by saying, yes, there are pro-Hamas supporters here. The very fine line between those that are well-meaning and wishing to support the normal Palestinian people and those which are supporting Hamas and have got their skewed message in terms of taking a very vitriolic approach to this is very, very thin. And we know for a fact that there are Hamas supporters here in the United Kingdom. Quantifying how many, that's the biggest challenge, Peter, because they're hiding in plain sight. But certainly what we've seen is individuals that have waged destructive or damaging campaigns. I mean, the RAF Norththorpe, Bryce Norton sort of attack is one case in point, where you've got individuals that have a very mixed bag of agendas and motivations, which are easily recruitable by those within Hamas who will use surreptitious means to drive them forward to carrying out more attacks of this nature.
We know as well there's been another arrest made in connection with 2 aircraft being damaged at RAF Bryce Norton in Oxfordshire. Of course, there are charges in that. We'll be very careful about that. 4 people were charged last month in connection with the security breach. But in regard to the arrest, specifically this 22-year-old man, are you surprised that more people have been arrested, especially as Palestine Action, which claimed responsibility for it, certainly they put it online, let us know that it had happened at Bryce Norton, and Palestine Action remain a prescribed organisation despite the fact that there's some legal cases about that and appeals against that prescription?
Yeah, I mean, well, firstly, the damage at Bryce Norton was approximately about £7 million worth of damage of what they caused. Many people will think, oh, they were just spray painting some of these planes. It's a little bit more than that, and certainly the other damage that was caused, a lot of that information won't necessarily be revealed to the general public, but sufficient enough that was actually self-publicised by Palestine Action. I'm working myself, Peter, against various pro-Palestine groups which are meaning to cause attacks. Now, the biggest challenge, and some of them have been successful in their attacks until such time as I was brought in, but certainly in terms of the differentiation or the segmentation or attrition to, or attribution, sorry, Peter, getting my teeth in a mix today, to Palestine Action. Well, I mean, there are so many different groups. It's so disparate, this blanket pro-Palestine protesters which are out there, that they can hide amongst, obviously, the more innocent, and they can carry out these attacks. Now, Palestine Action as one group has been prescribed as a terrorist organisation, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other people who will say, you know, I'm supporting Palestine, I'm pro-Palestine, but they may carry out these attacks in the name of Palestine or in the name of those motivations.
Do you think it's right to prescribe Palestine Action? There's a big controversy about it. We've got those legal cases going, people saying, actually, are people wearing a T-shirt or holding a banner saying, I support Palestine Action? Should that be treated as terrorism?
Well, yes, I think it should. But again, to go to your point, Peter, about Palestine Action as a specific group that's been prescribed, I think it's somewhat inert. I don't think it's going to make a great deal of difference, because any of those that were supporting Palestine Action will simply move to another group and do it under another name. The problem is you're not cutting the head off all of the heads of the Hydra. You're only cutting one head off by prescribing one group. It has to be addressed in a far more balanced way at looking at the individuals behind these groups. And the one thing I can tell you, Peter, is the recruitment by some of these groups to their supporters that want to carry out direct action is a very sophisticated approach. They will do background checks on those protesters or those supporters before they'll allow them to join their ranks. So they're using the advantages of modern technology, secret messaging apps, all sorts of things to operate. Now, we've seen this aligned to also how terrorist groups operate. So again, the nub of the problem has to be dealt with. And Keir Starmer stepping forward and saying the UK government will recognise Palestine as a sovereign state, that's conceding to terrorism in my book. And forgive my words, Peter, but where are the balls in our government in addressing something which is fundamentally being supported by a terrorist state and terrorist organisation?
Will, thank you. That's Will Geddes there, the security expert. Lots to chew on within that. Thank you, Will. Lots more of people getting in touch. Robert says, after weighing up the pros and cons, I voted for Brexit. However, I don't feel as if it's ever been fully implemented. Leaving the ECHR would be a step in the right direction. If another referendum were to be held on whether to leave the EU, I would still vote to leave in the hope that the UK regained its full sovereignty. Nick says, I'm stupid and thick. I'm sure that's not true, Nick. I'm stupid and thick. If I steal, break the speed limit, rob, assault, thieve, etc., I'd be arrested, charged and fined. How are these migrants almost rewarded for illegally entering this country? I'm 57. I'm terrified for the future of my family and myself. Please give us some soul-searching words of encouragement. All right then, Nick, here goes. I believe that this is a great country. I believe we can be a great country again. I think there have been really a huge number of problems. There have been very, very divisive arguments. There have been all sorts of problems that have been heaped upon us by successive governments, including a government I was for 3.5 years, a part of in terms of the Conservatives. And I think I did a good job. I think I did some good things. I worked for one particularly good person and 3 other ministers who weren't bad people at all. But one of them was particularly great, James Brokenshire. And I'm naturally an optimist. And I hope that we can get through this, but there's a lot to get through. And the problem is that we keep being told things that aren't true. We keep being offered solutions that won't work. But the British people are a really strong, resilient bunch of people who've been through an awful lot of things. We've been through worse than the way things are. Maybe not in living memory, but we've been through many, many worse things. I just hope that when I talk to you, hopefully I'll continue broadcasting on the station for a very, very long time. I just hope in a short time that things will be better. I want the economy to pick up. I want there to be better prospects for people. I want people to just be under less pressure economically, to have a bit more money, to have a bit more fun as well. I don't know where the fun is in our society anymore. I was watching yesterday, maybe I shouldn't have watched it, but I decided, sort of for journalistic purposes I suppose, to watch the Bonnie Blue documentary, the Channel 4 documentary about the pornographic actress. Has been really controversial. Loads of people said it shouldn't be shown, it should have been made. Advertisers want to withdraw from any advertising around it on the app, on the Channel 4 player. And I just saw young people within that who are these content creators, they call it, and we know the kind of content they create. And I was just profoundly sad. I just found there was just a lack of a soul. And I think what Britain needs to find is its soul. I think we need to find what unites us. I think we need to find, I'm not talking about diversity being our strength or any nonsense like that. I'm simply saying that there are core values that if we live every day by them, if we say, this is the standard that I'm going to live by, this is the integrity that I want to have, this is the example that I'm going to set in tiny ways. And Peter Blexley talks a lot, the crime commentator talks a lot about, he's really annoyed to have people putting their feet in the seats of public transport. Well, just don't do that. Why don't we just treat public transport as we want to treat it, in little tiny ways? We can all make a difference in tiny ways to make our society just a little bit better. We can be kind to people, we can look out for our neighbours, we can try to help older people, we can try to be kind, and we can try to perhaps not just be so depressed and so sad, because I think a lot of people, including myself actually, but certainly a lot of our viewers and listeners are ground down by this country at the moment. And I want to stand up and I want to be happy and I want to be proud of my country. I'm not sure I am at the moment. I do think it's a great country. It has great potential, but that's the problem. It's potential. It's not achieving that at the moment. I really hope things are going to get better. I'm not sure that's cheered you up, but those are my thoughts on the matter. We're going to get your thoughts in just a minute. Stay with us here on Talk.
foreign criminals have been vanishing from British courts mid-trial and re-offending under fake names. The former prosecutor talks about turning up for court. You know, you'd start the case, and as often happened, it gets adjourned for lunch. The judge says, "I'll give my ruling back after lunch," and the foreign criminal kind of disappears. And because they've been given been giving fake names, there's just no way of tracking them down in the system. So it's pretty astonishing, and it just kind of reveals some of the shambles going on inside our court system.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Stephen, who's in the Dordogne, I think. Is that correct, Stephen?
Yes, very nice here at the moment. Nice weather.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm glad to hear it. What are your thoughts today?
Well, basically, we've been living here for 15 years. We came in, obviously, before Brexit, and we've assimilated with the French. We respect the way they live. Otherwise, we wouldn't live here.
How's your French?
Yeah, well, we speak fairly good French. Je parle bien le français, je pense, maintenant. But,
okay.
Some people say je parle comme une vache espagnole. That's for the English who don't speak French.
Right.
Very well.
Yes. Okay.
But no. So basically, my family are looking to leave. My son's just bought a place in Spain.
So your family that live in the UK, just to be clear, they're thinking of leaving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. They've got children. They're the typical working class, middle class aspirant type. My daughter's professional. They want to get out of the UK now. They don't see the hope for the future. I think this is the worst part. You've got to give people hope. And I'm much older now, so for me, I'm where I am, and I'm not going to make much more. But for younger people, the UK doesn't offer that opportunity anymore, the ability to climb up the ladder. And I think that's the big problem. And you probably need a wealth tax.
You need a wealth tax, you think?
Yeah, like we've got in France. I mean, it's the only way, because who else are you going to tax? There'll be tax.
But won't those people then just leave? They're highly mobile people.
No, they don't. If you have Germany's introduced exit controls, 30% tax if you try and take your money out. So more and more, and America does the same. If you try and give up your American passport, because they tax worldwide on your income.
That's right. That's correct.
They take about 30% or something, quite a large chunk of your wealth. So the UK wouldn't have to tell people it's going to do this, but they need to actually impose a wealth tax with the budget and then apply the wealth tax, so people can't liquidate their assets and move them offshore.
Well, listen, thanks for your thoughts, Stephen. Really appreciate that. That's Stephen there in France talking about the state of the UK. Hev has been in touch with a voice note.
Good morning, Pete. It's Hev from Kent. I'm sick and tired of hearing this far right, left business, whatever. I don't really give a monkeys what all that is. I mean, who's going to give me a definition of any of those? I am sick to the back teeth of it. All I am is a concerned citizen. We are losing our Britishness. We are losing our laws. There's no point in deporting any of these people, because they're only going to come back. I mean, look at that guy that was deported twice, and he still kept coming back. What is we need to secure our borders, we need to stop all incentives, and then maybe we just might start feeling a little safer.
Thank you, Hev. Appreciate that. Heather says calling people far right and far left is dangerous. No wonder why our country is divided and ripping our country apart. William says if it's a right of the people to protest, then surely it must be illegal to protest that right to protest. Adrian in Wales says the migrants would be shipped to secure camps where they're not allowed to come and go. They'll be given basic accommodation, 40 a room, and one phone call per week. They can stay there until their asylum claims are processed, or they have to leave the country. That's the idea of Adrian from Wales. Thank you to Linda in Durham, who says, I'm sorry, but looking at our situation, these migrants are here to stay. Nobody has the will to do anything, and it's going to take something really big happening for the government to wake up and see what they have done to us. Peter says, good morning, Cardi P. I think this was sent a little while ago, it's now the afternoon, but nonetheless, good afternoon, Peter. If the government are providing driving lessons, surely they have no intention of sending anybody home. Fern in Glasgow, Starmer's gang come up with another nonsense regarding illegal immigration. They keep dreaming up the idea to do everything apart from stopping the actual boats. Mark has been in touch with a voice note.
Hiya, Peter. I'm Mark from Manchester. I heard what James is saying. I tell you what we don't want. We don't want our taxpayers' money getting spent on people who've not put into the system. We don't want people in our area what are raping our children. It's okay for these lefty lot to say, oh, well, what do you want us to do about it? How about put them in tents in the middle of nowhere, and then when they want to go home, we can send them home. Simple as that. Bag of rice, a tent, and that is it. Just like they're getting in France. Easy as that.
Thank you for that, Mark. Chris in Newbury says, I voted Leave with passion. However, politicians will never deliver what the people wanted. So the only option is to look after yourself and your family and abandon any hope of a decent UK. So I'd now vote to remain, simply to enable my family to choose from 27 other countries to live in rather than the UK. Quite a number of people have said that. Brian in Worthing says, if these people are genuinely fleeing a war, then I ask the question, why are these boats not filled with women and children? What kind of people would leave women and children in a war-torn country? So this shows you the calibre of them. This has nothing to do with them fleeing war. No other country would treat people who illegally enter like VIPs. It's unbelievable, says Brian in Worthing. Neil in Rugby, Peter, the small boat gangs are a symptom of illegal migration. They're taking advantage of and facilitating them. They're not causing the migrants to come. The reason they're coming are the benefits they will receive. Stop the benefits, stop the migrants. Sue VS says, why haven't the French used the millions of taxpayers in this country to man their own borders? Because they're part of the EU, which is intent on destroying the EU. Ross in Ipswich says, I originally voted for Brexit, would happily do so again. The problem we had at the time was a political elite that didn't implement the will of the people in a timely manner and had no desire to do so. Love the show. Kind regards, Ross in Ipswich. Sally in Lincolnshire talked about Andrew, the caller who was on earlier on about the Middle East and anti-Semitism. This is what Sally has to say.
What a wonderful caller Andrew is. I take my hat off to him, and he has educated me as well. Well done, Andrew.
Sally, thank you for that. I don't know about you, I have learned a heck of a lot today. More so than many other programmes, actually. I mean, usually I learn something, and I love this job because you just learn stuff all the time. But Kevin Saunders really educated me today. Amar Johal really educated me today. You talked about Andrew there as well. And the callers as well, I learned things from everybody. It's just, honestly, it's a real privilege to do this job, and I love it. And thank you, Sally, for that message. Just reminds us of just the conversations we have together on this programme and other programmes as well. And just to let you know, this week I'm doing Drive all week between 4 and 7. Jeremy Kyle is off this week, so I'm back tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I want to play a few more voice notes. Let's see if we can get through all 4 of these. Daniel on Starmer's definition of the far right.
Hello there, Peter. Daniel here in Cumbria. According to Starmer's definition of the far right, there's been anyone that prioritises their own citizens. Well, that means that 99% of the world's population and, well, 99% of the world's countries ought to fall under that description and definition. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's hear from James.
Hi, Peter. James Tower Remnants. So I decided to take a walk down to Britannia Hotel yesterday with a dog. Just see what was happening down there. There weren't much happening down there, pretty quiet there. There was one lady what I was talking to in her mobility scooter. She was originally from Edinburgh, so she was there with her grandkids. She just had a little simple sign on her mobility scooter, and it just said, "Save our children." And I think that about sums it up. That's what they've got to do, this government.
Thank you, James. I appreciate that. That's very poignant. Steve?
Hi, Steve from Manchester. It's obvious that what the government will do in its legislative changes is nothing effective at all, except in the contrary direction. The speeding up of asylum claims actually means allowing most of them to remain. Nobody, not one, should be allowed to remain who's come in via these routes across the channel. It's a disgrace. And the smashing the gangs is, an abiding joke. Look at Donald Trump. Look at Australia. There are clear ways forward. They just won't take them. We're seeing the population replacement of this great nation, and with it, the end of the British story.
Final voice note of the day from Nick.
Hi, it's Nick from Gloucester. On migration, which is obviously the hot topic, I wonder how you submit a Freedom of Information request. I would like to know, has it been mooted, or how long will it be until it's mooted that residents of this country are required by this government to accept illegal immigrants in order to empty the hotels? Another thing, we could send them all to Chagos. Oh no, we gave that away. Great show. Bye.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks.